Directors, April 13th, 2022. You'll all stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, you call the roll, please.
Division 1?
Here.
Division 2?
Here.
Division 3?
Here.
Division 4? Here. Division 5?
Here. Thank you very much. Okay, at this time we'll take public comment on any items not on today's agenda. If you'd like to speak to any item pertinent to NID, start on your phone or step up to the podium. And we will go with Michael Hillwell first. Oh, go ahead. You can stay there.
Good morning.
Michael, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. I come to you this morning to express disappointment and frustration resulting from the chair's misuse and abuse of his direct report time at the last meeting. As one who has complimented the chair on his skill at guiding meetings, I'm very disappointed at his using his time to make a statement he characterized as being part of his campaign for re-election. He knows better than to use his position as chair for political purposes, or should know better. Furthermore, his comments cast a dark shadow over the plan for water process. Many of us have been participating for years in board meetings, workshops, and public forums with the belief we were participating in an effort that would lead to a plan based on accurate data concerning the district's available and projected resources and the demand for those resources. The science of the plan would lead to recommendations concerning the need or not need for additional infrastructure. We thought the board members were withholding judgment until the plan was completed. Apparently, we were wrong, and Director Beerwagen has already made up his mind. I suggest, therefore, that since he has apparently made up his mind, he recuse himself from participating in any further plan for water development. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Go ahead, Otis.
Yeah, Otis Wallen, live on the Bear River in near Colfax in Placer County. And I hope that my remarks today are in the same vein as my remarks of the past, which have been both oral and written to be uplifting and informative. But I'm addressing today a problem that's a little bit different. And first, I want to thank you, Director Beerwagen, for being an honest man and being very straightforward and straight talking. Because in your candid moment in your report in the last meeting, you revealed yourself. It wasn't just for the dam, as the earlier speaker noted, because everyone knows California agriculture's mantra: more storage as long as we don't have to pay for it. So that's fine, and you can run on that, and that's good. But characterizing the Bear River as you did betrays so many different stakeholder groups. Native American community, to have the river that is the river of their tears for the genocide that stole it from them is unforgivable. Those environmental community, you can expect that response, and you've seen it in the newspaper. Recreationists, boaters, hikers, fishers. There's 3 guides that use that river for fly fishing instruction out of Meadow Vista as the entryway to the Sierra Nevada. You know, Schwarzenegger came up and stood on that place to announce the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. There is no taking that back, and the kind of sad walk back of March 28th, your written response, will not do. So where do you go now that it is a betrayal of the interests of those stakeholders? You've only begun to see it. The 5-minute viral video is on its way out there. You've only begun to see what's happening. Some possible remedies. You sat in that chair for over a year. You're there because you skipped over a normal rotation. I don't think it's possible for you to, I don't think you're clear on what the roles and responsibilities of a board chair are. I served for you, 4 times in Placer County over the 21 years there, and you have to separate that role from your personal role and from your personal district views. I don't think, I know you didn't do that, and I don't think you can do that. The gracious thing to do would be simply to step down as chair and let another rotation happen. Barring that, a second thing you can do is you have utterly undermined the ability of your general manager to hold the position of neutrality. She cannot do that when the chair of the board is not neutral. That undermining, I don't think you can do unless you step down. Further, all of you on the board, that viral 5 minutes shows all of you with your chair, with your president, speaking on your behalf. It would be interesting if there was an agendized vote of confidence in your board chair. Would you vote for confidence that you can move forward in that way? I may be one of the earlier voices you hear. So those are 3 ideas the previous speaker said, a fourth that I didn't think of with the recusing. But I don't think simply recusing is enough. You need to take action in order to win back all of the constituents. I represent landowners who moved there because we love that place. The characterization of it as a low elevation drainage ditch displays the honesty that you feel. And it's okay. It's not okay to sit in that seat at the same time. So please take action, earn back the trust of the public, earn back the trust of the stakeholders, and do something about this.
Thank you, Otis. Next is Mikos Faberson. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Well, I read the article in the Union newspaper drafted by Melinda Booth and Tracy Sheehan, and I fully agree with their assessment. I just listened to Otis. I think he made a good summary of that. I'm not going to pile on here, but I too expected that the plan for water, which many of us participated in trying to structure initially to make sure that it was comprehensive, that people who had knowledge and who had commitment in the public to doing the right thing and going through a process that would be believable and rational. We were counting on that, and I still count on it. I've backed off of my participation at NID board meetings with the hope that the plan for water, now that it's structured, would go forward in a way that would build public confidence that we are going in the right direction, whatever that direction may turn out to be. And to hear that kind of comment made by Director Beerwagen really undermine my faith in that process. So I won't say more, but I think you really need to follow the process that you've established that people have worked hard to do. And my second comment is really sadness about what will be the loss of Director Peters' participation through whatever process happened to redistrict the district. And it's unfortunate that with the time it takes to really come up to speed and have knowledge of communities' needs and all of the comprehensive knowledge base that requires to do a job as an NID board director, to have somebody so competent have to, now crawl into a hole, I guess, is just really sad to me. I didn't watch how the redistricting was done, so I really can't comment on it. I'm assuming you went through a legitimate process, but I'm just saying the outcome is rather tragic, I think. And I'm really sorry to have to see Laura go at the end of the year. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mikos. Anybody else? Stuart Feldman, go ahead.
Thank you. I am Stuart Feldman. I live in Meadow Vista, which is not in the district, but which is along the Bear River area. And I just wanted to say that the board has three responsibilities, in my opinion. First and foremost is to provide the necessary requirements for delivering water to your customer base. Second is stewardship of the river and the environment that the river allows to foster both the wildlife and the individuals. And that means both sides of the river, the Nevada County and Placer County side, whether they are in the district or not. And the third and most significant for your board is fiscal responsibility. And as far as I understand, you don't have a financial manager in the district. And how can you even consider some of the aspects of this proposed centennial project, which has reared its ugly head again, without having a fiscal manager to tell you whether that's even possible? Thank you.
Laura Barhide, go ahead.
Good morning. Excuse me, I'm have a bad cold, so I hope my voice is coming through all right. I just want to let you know that I think Mr. Beerwagon has done an amazing job as being in charge of the board. I don't have any of this written down because I didn't know what I was going to hear this morning. But before you became in the position you're in, the board was difficult to set through the meetings. They were so out of control. And I really appreciate how you have brought things together and keep things moving smoothly, and everybody gets a chance to speak, and we don't go on those long, drawn out tangents that were happening before. And I want to just say all of the board members, everybody has their own opinions going into any decision. That's the way it is. We are humans. We all have our own thoughts. And then when we come together as a board and we see all the facts and we discuss it, those opinions can change. And I have seen Mr. Beerwagon's opinion change over the time when he has considered different things. I really do not want to see you have to step down. I recuse yourself. I think you are an honorable man, and you will do the best for all of the water users in Nevada and Placer County, and for NID itself, to keep it healthy into the future. And I think what I'm hearing from everybody is they're calling your opinions, but they have their own opinions, which happens to be the opposite of what you expressed. And so I don't feel like their opinions should mean more than yours, especially since they are, as admitted, not actual customers of NID, and what affects those of us that have our livelihoods, our health and safety, everything that goes along with having our water supply. It shouldn't be determined by people who do not use the water. And I understand the environment. I really care about it myself. But I do think we need to keep an open mind here. I have seen, other people on the board have opinions that were, I felt, swayed because of some leftovers from the former some attitudes that they had towards the former general manager. And they have actually said a few little things there that I went, wow, I hope they can let go of that when they're making these decisions. So I think it's, we just have to keep that in mind. We're all trying to do our best, and we're going to have an open mind here and try to do the best for not only the Bear River, but for all of the people that live and use the water in Placer and Nevada counties. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Excuse me. Diana Flores, you're next. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Unmute.
Flores, are you there?
Yes, thank
There
you.
go.
I would like to just say that the people who are not customers that live in Bear River Canyon have been ignored through this process, and it is extremely unjust. And to say that because we're not NID customers who actually live on the Bear River, to be excluded from the discussion is undemocratic and probably unconstitutional. I would like to say that President of the NID Board, Director Chris Beerwagen, is beloved by his community, even when they don't agree with him on the billion-dollar dam issue. He is pleasant and kind, helps his neighbors, and represents a family legacy dating back over 116 years. None of that qualifies him to lead the Plan for Water or the NID Water Agency. After the removal through gerrymandering of a director who was not supportive of the Centennial Dam, it is quite disturbing to wonder if Director Beerwagen's campaign pledge was somehow related. The NID board has been known for shenanigans in the past. In order for the Plan for Water to have any legitimacy, a truly independent facilitator must take over and conduct the analysis completely independent from NID. Someone who refers to our Bear River, sacred to the indigenous people, as a quote, low elevation drainage ditch, is not the right person for the job and needs to be replaced by someone with new and better ideas. Thank you.
Anybody like to comment this time on items not on the agenda? Turn on your phone. Go ahead.
Morning. Thank you all very much for being here, and thank you very much for the comments. My name is Jeff Litton. I'm a National Geographic educator and naturalist, filmmaker, but I'm also an NID customer. Thank you very much for the good water. I appreciate that. I want to speak firstly in appreciation. Thank you so much to Director Peters. I think that you're the best board member that this organization has ever seen. You were a veteran of the Air Force, and then had decades of experience working in water resource management. So I think that not only do you bring the most experience to this board today, but I think you bring more experience to this board ever. And so I think that you are the finest director that we've ever had. And to that note, I do think that it is unfortunate how you have been treated. And I just want to review, Webster's definition of gerrymandering is the practice of dividing or arranging a territorial unit in election districts into a way that gives one political party an unfair advantage in elections. I don't know how to more accurately describe that than to kick a director out of her own district. That's gerrymandering. And to put that line within a mile of her house, to move people who recognize and people who come from Lincoln, and to then say, no, these people, they belong in Lake of the Pines. That doesn't make sense. And my understanding of the redistricting process is that it's supposed to reflect the current districting and the allotment from census data. And it's certainly not a projection or a speculation. So I think that was really an unfair process. And I do want to also speak to the comments made by Director Beerwagen in the last meeting. Not only did you call Bear River a oil basin drainage ditch, which is sacrilegious. I mean, it's sacrilegious and it's offensive. Not only are there village sites down there and ancestral burial grounds, but this is our homeland too. My ancestors don't come from here, but that doesn't mean it's not my homeland. And so, Bear River is our open air sanctuary. It is our open air cathedral. And to call it a ditch, But also, there were other things that you said that were extremely troubling, like quoting, Rem Scherzinger, and giving his opinion that, that even in dry years, the Centennial could be filled. And that's really dangerous. And that's because, as we all know, the only way to do that is by obtaining the 1927 water rights. And that would supersede the water rights that are used by South Sutter Water District down below us. And so if you do that, if you take out the intended, 221,400 acre feet of water out of the watershed, which is the intention of Centennial, take that number, 220,000, divide that over the 40,000 acres of agricultural land that use that water in South Sutter. That's about 5 feet of water for all those 40,000 acres of land. And so to say that we can take that and send that south, it is quite dangerous and quite scary that you would promote that. I do think that you should step down. I think that it would be fair for Director Peters to take over as president for the rest of her term. She was being vetted to be the director. And the last thing I want to mention is, a leader is incredibly important. Let's use the analogy of somebody cutting a road through a forest. A manager is in charge of the operations on the ground. How do you make that trail through a forest? But the leader's job is to climb the tree and see what's the right direction for that road to go. And a leader sometimes needs to see, well, actually, the road that we're constructing currently is headed towards a cliff. And I think that Laura had that foresight to be able to look and study and see that in many ways the management strategies of this organization, this publicly owned organization, was going in the wrong direction. And I think that what we need in this time is strong leaders. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Lee. Anybody else like to comment on any item not on today's agenda? Start on your phone, step up to the podium.
I'm Bob Lechsteiner. I'm not here about the dam. I'm here about Maranatha project. We've been trying for 3 years to get water. Our wells are going dry. If you truck water in, it's about $8,000 a year. A big chunk of our change. Most of us are retired people up there. We'd like your consideration to look into it a little more closely. I heard the comment from the last meeting about saving money. Didn't want to spend the money, want to save it. Well, if banks did that, they wouldn't make loans and make money. You will make money off your loans. I understand it's not immediately, but you will get your money back with interest. And we're just really, our wells are going dry, I'm telling you, we're serious, we're desperate.
Could you restate the name of the project again? I didn't hear it.
Maranatha.
Maranatha, okay. I think that was what we talked about.
Yeah, there was other homeowners that were here.
That's right.
They were here last month too, yes.
Yeah.
So we're trying to just keep you guys, keep it in your conscious, that we're out there, we're desperate, we're worried about our water source. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to comment this time for any item not on today's agenda that's pertinent to the NID business? Start on your phone. All right, seeing none, we will move on with our agenda. Consent agenda.
I'd like to pull item 3G, please.
3G.
Mr. President, I'd like to pull item 3B,
B.
as in boy, and 3D as in dog.
Okay.
Okay.
Four. Okay. All right, we'll start with, Director Holt.
Okay,
Okay.
We want a motion.
we want a motion that,
The rest of them?
mhm.
Okay. That gets it mixed up a little bit.
It's okay.
I'll entertain a motion this time to approve the rest of the consent agenda. So moved.
Second.
I'll move in second, all those, let's see.
So just to be clear, Mr. President, we're approving items 3A, C, F, and H. Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see. Public comment on consent agenda items 3A, 3C, 3F, and 3H. Any public comment on those items? Madam Secretary, you call the roll, please.
Yes. Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
Aye.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye. Sure. So we're going to take them in order. 3B is regular text. Minutes of March 23rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. My comment is, will be brief, but it goes to a bit of what we've heard today. And that is that on the minutes of March 23rd, where it outlines the Board of Directors' items and reports, I think that the comments under Director Beerwanger need to be expanded to include your comments that we've heard about today. I think that to simply write commented on drought and the need to capture more water is really not representative of what you said. And I think that to just leave it at that looks like there's I just think we need to be more transparent, and we need to say, this is what you said, and it needs to be reflected in the minutes, in some summary that is greater than capture water and drought. That isn't really reflective. So I don't know if the rest of the board feels that way, but I just would like to.
I'll second that.
Any other board discussion?
I think that's a fair observation.
So we can handle this one of two ways. The board can provide direction for us to provide a more robust summary, and you can take consideration of the minutes still and vote on them now, or would you like to see them come back? It doesn't matter to us, whatever the board desires.
You know, I think they need to come back. I mean, this was a big item for so many folks in the public sphere and in folks we've heard from today. And I think that we need to make certain we get it right.
Okay, so then we're essentially going to table the item? Sure.
Yes, to table it and bring it back with a more robust description of Director Beerwagen's comments for the minutes.
Okay, so I'll need a motion to table.
Laura had a comment to add.
And I'd also like to, in that same comment, you mentioned that 100,000 acre-feet of water was lost to the district this winter. And I went back and looked at the gauging station data, and it seems like maybe it's a quarter of that amount. But to have all that water spilling, going through the system without spilling Rollins, made me wonder when I looked at the upper division reservoir, they're less than 60% full at this time. And it makes me think of something we really need to consider in our plan for water is, are we going to prioritize our water supply for hydro operation or for water supply? I mean, we need to prioritize that, because if we're spilling our upper, I don't know how we could have gotten all that system through the system without spilling Rollins in our upper division. And you mentioned that Kean had said, our hydro manager said that we were gangbusters making energy during that time. And so we need to keep prioritize what is our priority for our use of our water.
Yeah, we can, how about this? Well, that's a good topic. We can touch on that in the general manager's report. We do have an explanation for it. So why don't we touch on that during the general manager's report when we get the water supply? And then staff will work on revising the minutes to reflect a more thorough summary of President Beerwagen's comments, and we'll bring the item back.
I would appreciate that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I need a motion to table this item till they reflect the comments made.
I'll make a motion to table item 3B, to give management a chance to make the edits as we discussed.
Second?
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Oh, second, please. I thought you said you seconded it.
I just stated that wrong.
Okay.
Okay, moved in second, any further board discussion? And any member of the public like to comment on this item to update the minutes? Sid Brown, go ahead.
My name is Sid Brown. I'm wondering, can you hear me?
Can hear you. Go ahead, Sid.
Okay, I just wanted to, I'm speaking from my iPad, so it doesn't typically convey sound. So thank you for accepting comment on this. And I would just like to reiterate my support of Director Heck's request that this be modified. The item on March 23rd, the minutes were absolutely inadequate. And I just thank Director Heck for requesting a little bit more expansive and straightforward representation of what happened there. So thank you very much. I just wanted to endorse that.
Anybody else? Mr. Litton.
Yes, just to echo the same comment, thank you very much for proposing this. This was another thing I wanted to mention, and so I think that a complete transcript, I think that many of the points in there were important, not only the, comment about it being a low elevation drainage ditch, but also to, supporting, past director Rem Scherzinger, his quotes in there too. I think that it's important to put all of that in there, so thank you very much for proposing that.
Thank you. Anybody else like to comment on item 3B, the minutes from March 23rd? Okay, Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
Aye.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye. Next is Director Heck, item 3B.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the budget amendment authority level, I would like us to add somewhere in here a not to exceed without board of directors approval. And I understand, and I did speak with our general manager about this, and she said that this, along with what is the other policy?
The procurement
The
policy.
procurement policy, that they would work hand in hand. And, I got to thinking about that, and if that makes sense, then I would then add a reference to the procurement policy in here. But somewhere they have to tie together, that the amendment authority and either there's a limit to it, or that it is tied to the procurement policy, which would then have a limit.
So maybe we can figure this out. So, the budget, prior to this proposed amendment to the policy, the general manager had the authority to increase overall appropriations of the budget by $600,000.
Right.
So what that means is that the general manager, without board input, can take $600,000 out of the unassigned fund balance and spend it without board input. This new policy, that's not typically normal. So this new policy takes all of that ability to increase appropriations away from the general manager and places it solely within the board's hands. So how it's proposed now and how it was also reflected in the resolution that was utilized for approval of the annual budget this year is that the general manager cannot increase appropriations at all.
Right.
And the general manager is only allowed to move money within an existing operating budget within the appropriation within a fund. So for example, in Fund 10, water operations, and what typically happens, you'll see, is that there will be items that will, for example, insurance. A lot of times insurance has slight increases over the year that are not reflected when we do the original budget projections. So it's common to take funds out of, it could be anything, overtime, and move them to cover the overage in insurance. The new procurement policy, which is written, and we had it slated to come in draft form next week during the Plan for Water workshop. However, that workshop's getting a little bit full with some of the other items. So we moved, you'll notice from our previous schedule, we moved all financial items to the next meeting. Also a reflection of some of the finance staff being gone for spring break this particular week. So that procurement policy I'm proposing that we lower the city manager's authority, spending authority, contracting or spending authority down to $35,000. So if we can either reference So for example, if I wanted to move, and the big moves you'll often see is when we use consultant support services to backstop staff vacancies. So a lot of times what you'll see is I would propose we'll move, $50,000 from salaries to consultant services to pay for a consultant to backfill if we have a vacancy. So in that particular case, if I wanted to use $50,000 worth of salary for consultant services, I would be allowed to make the budget movement, but I wouldn't be allowed to enter into the contract because of the new procurement policy. So the funds would still be restricted. So in most agencies, the general manager can move money within the fund, but cannot exceed their contract authority. So if you'll recall, our current procurement policy allows the general manager to enter into contract agreements up to $100,000, which I don't think is a good idea for the district. I do think, I'm a huge supporter of that being lowered. So I think it's, it depends on the board's level of comfort, as I would be already restricted with the procurement policy. Some of the things that Director Heck and I talked about was making sure that those two items came for final approval together to give the board a little bit more consideration. So it really is up to the board.
Well, and it was so that we could see them together. It's hard to pass one thing in a vacuum knowing that we're going to do something else. And again, this has to do with not only our current general manager, who I have extraordinary trust with, but you may or may not always be the general manager. And so I wanted to make this policy be as clear for the next general manager who may not have your integrity.
How about we do this? What if we table the item and then bring it back in consideration with the draft procurement policy? And we'll look at them together and then make any modifications if the board desires at that time, and then we'll bring them back for formal approval at a later time. Because the budget amendment authority, I am 100% against the ability to increase appropriations by $600,000. And so I already took that ability away from the general manager through the adoption of the 2022 annual budget in the resolution. That is just simply a fraud control. And so that I'm comfortable if this sits until we get the procurement one done, if that is what the board desires to do.
I think, my opinion is I think that's true, to just bring it together, because they really are tied together. And whatever anybody else wants is fine.
I think that's fine. I do think with policies, it's helpful to have some reference to how different policies fit together. So in my conversation with Jennifer, we talked about the fact that when you start overlapping information from different policies, then when you update one policy, you have to make sure it cascades to the other policies. So I'm not suggesting that we repeat what you have in one policy, but I do think in this policy as an example to do what you referenced, which would be just to make a notation, additional policies for consideration or for frame of reference would be the procurement policy, or, so that even though, and if you don't want to put the policy number, I don't really care, but just reference what the name of the policy is. That way, for the person who may not see how things fit together, it helps to tie it up.
We could add just a simple sentence under 3100.2 scope, approval authority levels are limited as below. And I apologize, we did have, Director Peters had brought to our attention, we had some weirdness with our original red lines that we submitted. So the policy, we could just add another sentence at the end. It says the general manager may not add full-time equivalent positions to the annual budget. And we could just add another sentence that says the general manager may only make expenditures consistent with the procurement policy.
There you go.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. Then,
Then there's there's a tie out.
okay,
And I would add the number of policy 38.
we can do that.
I think it's good to have a reference to it.
So are we okay with that particular modification and then consider it today? Okay.
Well,
motion?
Yeah, and I would so move that we approve this item. Let's see, District Policy 3100 as amended per our discussion.
Second.
Second, okay, moved and seconded. Any member of the public? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I really appreciate looking at policies holistically. As I mentioned last meeting, I said, wow, you're making the change on this one policy, but there's all these other policies that refer to it, and it wasn't a big deal last week. But I completely concur. We need to be looking at these things to where we understand the full impact of this. Not just, here's this, oh, by the way, by doing that, you inadvertently did this. And so, and because we don't know, we need to approve all of the other policies that had this ad hoc and the standing committee meetings, water power.
Oh, that was dealt with in
It
there.
was included in the motion.
And you guys were gonna go through and clean up the policies, but then the.
And well, there was a reference, just like we're referencing here.
The resolution was modified to incorporate that condition into the action. It doesn't need to come back.
Go to the individual, policies online to see whether or not they were actually done.
If you wanted to check to see if staff did as directed in the resolution, we could also send it to you.
Any other further, board comment on this item? Discussion. So would any member of the public like to comment on, consent agenda item 3D, updates to district policy 3100 budget amendment? Start on your phone. Okay, seeing none, Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 1,
Aye.
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye. Okay, next is, consent agenda item number 3E, Laura Peters.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This has always been a baffling proposal to me, and I was wondering, so this battery project program that we're doing to try and capture PUC funds for some seller or something, I didn't even go through all of this, but my question is, did we ever install any of the ones that were approved last year?
The projects are underway right now.
So we started construction at one of them at E. George. The others have not yet started construction.
Have not yet started, so
Correct.
why? I mean,
It's the timeline for the individuals and their contractor to do that work.
There's a long lead time, right now on all materials and batteries and labor.
Yep.
I see. And what are the expected cost savings? It says we're gonna get 100% of the expected cost savings, but we don't know what those expected cost savings are. It's a lot of work for our staff, from what I understand, is that they have the electrical work, our electricians have sometimes insert these systems. And for 4 hours, I never could quite understand the cost benefit benefits of this, the cost of what it's taking and the staff time to implement it.
So
It's always very vague.
I can defer some of that to Tanya, but the idea being is that as part of the secondary benefit of this program is possibly you need to have to discharge and recharge the batteries to keep them performing at a high level. So the idea is that you discharge your batteries during peak time when we're paying the most for power, and you recharge them in off-peak. So it's cheaper to recharge them than it is the cost that we see. So the savings is the cost that we see by not paying as much in power rates during the peak times. So overall, we get a cost savings, the district, a reduction in our PG&E bill.
And there was a number for that, if I remember correctly.
There was in the previous ones.
I'm shooting from the hip, and thousands it was, but I remember that was a selling point to this project.
Right, and maybe Tanya, she's on the line, she's the project manager, maybe she can address that a little better.
Hi, can you guys hear me? I muted my phone.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hi there. Yes, so as Doug was indicating, the savings that we would be seeing would be as a result of the charging during off-peak times and then discharging during peak times. And with the new tariff rate, GSRE provided a calculation that, and it depends on the site. So for example, the E. George site, we would see a cost savings of about $8,523.
Over how, what period, over 15 years? Per year?
That
Per
would
year,
be,
correct, Tanya?
yes, I'm verifying that would be per year. Yes.
$8,000 per year.
That's
Yeah, so
correct.
the proposed contract has a 10-year period, so in theory, it would be around $80,000 in energy bill savings. So how these programs work, and they have these types of programs for all types of energy saving opportunities. Typically, what you'll see is you'll see contractors such as these come forward, analyze your system for energy efficiency, and battery usage is a big one. So as Mr. Roderick stated, essentially, we are buying power on off-peak prices, storing in our battery, using it during the peak, so we're having a lower cost energy. So when, the way, as Mr. Roderick explained, we receive the cost savings associated with the reduced electricity bill, and that is the benefit to the district. So in this particular situation, it's about $80,000 over the 10 years. The private entities that do these programs, they receive the benefit of any rebates, tax credits, any other type of state program that they're participating in. So a lot of them will come and bundle up a number of projects and then kind of sell them on a market with whatever credit system they're dealing with. So in this situation, this is the fourth of the 4 projects. You've already seen 3 of them to be implemented at the treatment plants. And so this is the final project that will be before you for approval.
And actually, with the new suggested changes to the documents about not splitting originally, if you remember, there was cost splitting of the benefits that we received of the $8,500. We paid a portion back to these individuals. That's no longer on the table. So in terms of staff time and effort, it's a lot simpler because we're just receiving all the benefits of that. We don't have to go through and calculate out and cut a check at the end of the year, et cetera, to go back. So it's actually an easier process for us. All the maintenance, all the responsibilities associated with the project, that's all on them. So there's no staff time involved with operations, maintenance of that facility.
There's a 10-year term with a potential for a 5-year extension on the contract.
Correct. And a 5-year, we enter into the agreement, we got 5 years. If we stop that sooner than that, then we have to pay a percentage and it's broken down in the contract.
Yeah, there's an early termination clause included in the contract.
So once these are installed, staff doesn't have to do anything at all with them?
If there's a problem, it's on them.
They own and operate the
They own
system.
and operate.
And I remember from last time, we had the very same size battery for E. George, which is an 18 MTD plant, at Loma, Rica, which is a 6.5 MTD plant, and then at Norline Pump Station, which is just a pump station. And so how would they prefer to? Tanya, did they give you savings on the other 2 facilities?
It
Yes.
doesn't necessarily matter in this particular situation because we're not purchasing or owning the batteries. They're deploying their own batteries and they keep ownership of them.
But we're not gonna realize $8,000 at Norline.
Yeah, but Tanya, do you have
Well,
any
there
savings?
was a number, overall number for the 4 projects that are wiring, I don't remember what the number is.
Tanya has the number.
Yes, the numbers are different per site. So for Loma Rica, we were looking at 7246. For Norline, 5575. And for the Main Street, 4499.
Tanya, this is Rich Johansson. So are these under the old PG rates, or are we looking at maybe even increased savings due to their increased rates? During peak, 4 to 9.
These are under the new tariff rates as we understood them in August of last year. So any increase this year, that's not calculated yet.
If we added solar to this, then we would get the 26% savings, federal tax savings, all that doesn't count.
We don't get any tax savings. That's the benefit of these. Yeah, that's why you often see these types of energy efficiency programs are initiated and carried out by a third party that's private, because they are making their money not through cost savings. They are making their money by bundling tax credits, rebates, and any other ancillary benefit that we don't achieve.
Right, and I agree with that. So did they offer a solar package with this? No.
Solar would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis to determine whether or not it's feasible with the amount of space we have at each one of those facilities, what tariff they're currently on, the return on investment. Solar, I did actually a very large solar project when I was in Lincoln, and it can be much more complex than the analysis portion of it. It's always something good to inquire about, though, for sure.
We, on the mine, we're asking for a $14 million bond to cover any potential expenses of extending our distribution lines and serving, people who lose their wells. Are we asking for a bond on this to cover the disposal of the batteries and the tear down?
It's included in the agreement. I don't feel that a bond is necessary. I don't know that they would provide financial surety given the terms of the agreement.
Well, they just changed ownership.
And that's quite common. They usually change ownership based off of their bundling of separate projects. Because a lot of these entities, and I haven't spoken with them directly, they will bundle several of these projects and then sell them to a third party as part of an investment portfolio.
And so this new company that bought it decided they didn't need as much money, and that's why they said you can keep 100% of the cost savings instead of having to help pay them?
No, it's the administrative burden of managing this sharing of the cost savings associated with the PG&E bills. It gets fairly complex really quickly.
Could I ask, Tanya, are the savings that you noted, are those annual savings? I'm a little confused about 10-year period.
Yeah, it was $8,000 approximately over a 10-year period. So it'd be about $80,000 over, yeah, just for each.
And then you gave the other three during that.
She said, I almost thought she said 8,000 for this one when we first asked.
George.
So
It was for George.
for George is 8,523.
What's the cost savings on this one, Tanya?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The cost estimate for savings for here at the Main Street, was that like 4,400 or somewhere in there?
Correct.
I wrote them all down, they add up to 25,000. That's, I remember a number when we first talked about it. Yep. So,
Okay, thank you.
so after Monday night, talking to an expert in solar batteries, solar panels and batteries, it's, the United States is only recycling 10% of its solar panels right now. And the batteries really haven't figured that one out yet. So I just wanted, for $250,000, I'd like to have a little more guarantee that we're not, fighting off a disposal bill that's much larger.
So they are responsible and required to remove the facilities either at the end of the 10-year or basically after the 5 years if we choose to do that, all on their cost. So we're not going to be responsible for that.
If they're in business.
Yeah, but I think maybe Tanya or I think we have an individual on phone as well from this group, can talk maybe a little about, does the consent to lateral assignment, does that have anything that?
Yeah, they would be assigned the entire contract, which includes responsibility for moving the battery at the end of the term.
You need a lender that.
Yeah, this part, remember, the other three have already been approved.
But I
Okay.
abstain
Yep.
because of these reasons.
Yeah, I believe Mark Folke should be, I don't see him as a participant. Maybe he called in, but if you had specific questions about the agreement or the collateral consent, he should be on the line to answer those. He may have
He's
to.
on.
Mark Hilke?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, yes, I'm the managing principal for ESR Energy, and we'd like to ask for the board's consideration and approval of this fourth project. We started with at least double this, but the number of projects that were appropriate and also were eligible for this incentive was winnowed down. So this is a smaller number of projects than our original hoped for with NID. But that said, it's a good portfolio. This will be bundled with other projects with our financing partner. We are in construction at Bear Valley Water District. We're doing a couple at some Native American tribes in Southern California. And with our financing partner, Swell Energy, there'll be I think it's over 4 dozen projects of this type. Some of those other projects, by the way, are smaller. They're not all wastewater treatment. But in any event, we've brought in Swell Energy. That is a company that has a lot of momentum in the battery storage business. They're very comfortable with Tesla energy technology. And we felt that they were a good partner for this project. I will mention that there are some supply chain issues with Tesla product, which helps to explain why we did not get all 3 of these going all at the same time. So the other 2, and then Main Street, of course, would also be subject to the board's consent, of course, would also be a little bit delayed compared to East George, but there is a requirement to build within the time frame of the SGIP incentive. The SGIP incentive is now totally sold out in all territories, PG&E, SCE, and SDG&E. PG&E sold out first. I think it was back in October, if I'm not mistaken.
The other benefit that we get, of course, is that all of these facilities do have backup generators with these batteries in place, which is one of the primary reasons for this program. It allows us to use those batteries first before we have to start our generators, which, depending on the loads at the time, it could be 4 hours, it could be longer, depending on what kind of loads we got going on at facilities, which just means it saves us in terms of cost for propane or gas or diesel by not having to run those generators as quickly.
I like that aspect of it, because we need more backup. And Sophie, is it Mark?
Yes, sir. I have a new computer. I don't know if I can put my video on, but anyway, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so what's the life expectancy of a battery, and have you ever, at the end of the life expectancy, replaced the batteries if the infrastructure is still good and the program's still working?
Okay, so the life expectancy of the battery, it's warranted 15 years. Some of us believe that the battery has some life after that. Just call it a few years after that. Batteries do degrade over time. So at the end of 15 years, the kWh capability of the battery is reduced compared to year 1. But I personally oversaw 102 projects like this using this technology, Tesla Power Pack technology in Southern California, Edison. Previously, I was the chief development officer of a company called Advanced Microgrid Solutions. So although we built those in 2015 through 2019, none of those have reached the end of their design life. They all are working as planned. We have, I think we had 9 wastewater treatment plants in Southern California. The policy for the replacement and I guess disposal, excuse me, not the replacement, the disposal of the battery is that those will be shipped, the batteries will be shipped back to the Tesla Gigafactory. It's Tesla's responsibility to take back the equipment for recycling. So while I can't say that I have experience with bring that over there, it's just because we haven't gotten to that point in time. The costs are really bringing it out of the dirt and putting it on a truck and shipping it back to Gigafactory.
And then the infrastructure stays.
We are required to remove the infrastructure, or we can leave it in place at the district's discretion.
Yeah. So I understand that Tesla has probably the best policy for, supporting a project like this. Is that your experience also?
100%, sir.
Mr. Peters?
So I know that these batteries are the same batteries for these different facilities, which have different demands. And you said 4 hours, but would they last 4 hours, the same 4 hours at E. George with their demand, as an Orleans pump station with their demand? Do you have any idea of how long the battery would actually last, given the E. George demand?
So E. George and Loma, Rica, and New Orleans Pump House all have the inverter and 2 power packs. And in your mind's eye, a power pack is just it's an oversized refrigerator that's very heavy and full of batteries. And then West Main Street would have 3 power packs behind that inverter. The size of the system was based on, or has been based on, the usage of the facility. The actual duration of backup, it will vary between the sites just based on load patterns. And it is possible to adjust operations and extend the duration if that is requested. But that's, once we get into the operations period. Right now, it's, the base case is a minimum of 4 hours. But if certain operational changes are made, you might be able to extend the duration. That's just something we would work with the operations team.
So the 2 power packs would give E. George's current demand, 4 hours of service. That means probably New Orleans pump station would be 8 or 9 hours. Is that a fair jump?
Yes, Board Member Peters, I think the way to say it is that it would be at maximum usage, it would be 4 hours at East George. So if I'm just in a theoretical, I know this is not reality, but in a theoretical, if that maximum usage were cut in half, then it would be 8 hours. That's a very rough example, but just as we're all getting comfortable with the duration, it's if everything's going at one time, that's 4 hours. But if there's a way to change operations and have a half of the maximum load, it would extend the duration of the backup. Now, these, I think, as everybody here surely knows, these are pumps. This is not something you can just switch off a few breakers at your house and turn off the fridge or whatever. So I want to be sensitive to assuming we can get more duration than the base case, but that's just a detailed conversation we would have with the operations team. Does that make sense?
Okay.
It also has to do with the loading, right? Pumps, while they may not use as much energy as E. George in a 4-year period or a 4-hour period, when you first start them up, they take a lot of energy to draw, right, to get those things up and running. So part of this team designs these packs to be able to meet those requirements. And I think part of it is their batteries in blocks, right? So you can't get like 400 different battery blocks to be able to cut and paste for each individual site.
2 power packs gives us 4 hours of running time at each order. Okay, thank you.
Any further board discussion? Would any member of the public like to comment on this item? The self-generation city program, item 3E of the consent agenda. Starting on your phone. Secretary, you call roll, please. We need a motion. We need a motion. We do, we always, who would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve item 3E in the consent agenda for the self-generation incentive program battery project.
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any further board discussion? Okay. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll now, please?
Yes. Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1?
Aye.
Division 5?
I'd like to see more return, but yes.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye. Thank you. Okay. Item 3G, Director Paul.
So I just wanted to make a request about the fire hydrant. So in our policy, it says that the charge for hydrant installation, relocation, or removal shall be paid by the applicant and/or local firefighting entity. And it seems as a district, we have a little bit of we have a mixed approach to this. With the historical district finance water lines, the district has paid for installation of fire hydrants, but when it's a developer project, my understanding is that the developer pays. So I would just like to request that before we fund any fire hydrant installation for any project that we're funding as a district, I would like to have a conversation about that prior to the project actually coming to us. So in other words, we're talking about the policy, because if we're going to be installing fire hydrants at district cost, which we currently do on occasion, then we should adjust the policy.
So perhaps when we bring back the district-funded water line extension conversation, we'll bring that back in concert, because that's where your issue typically arises, is with those types of projects. Because you are correct, any new development or new construction would be required per fire code to put in their own fire hydrants. And so I can see how the inconsistency between the two programs can be problematic.
Yeah.
And the community investment program paid for the hydrants, and there's currently no budget for the current community investment program. So at least at the moment.
Yeah, and the community investment program is part of your currently stated reserves per policy that were not proposed to be funded in the 22 budget.
I just would like to have a policy discussion on it, so that we as a board we have consistency between our actions.
That's a good point. I agree with that.
I mean, okay, so we'll bring that discussion back in consultation with the district funded water line extension program.
Thank you.
Okay.
Director Heck.
Yeah, so, Doug, if we can have a greater discussion about whether we simply do not need the 16-inch pressure main, this main transmission line between Brunswick and Sutton, if that is just simply not needed. My sense is that this is the best time to do it, and yeah, there might be some delay, but I think the developer can do other, depending on where it would be located. I wouldn't think that we'd have to stop the entire development, and this seems like it will be more expensive later. Prices are not gonna go down, they're gonna go up. And if we could just get that line in now, it seems, if there is a need, and it seems like at one point you thought there was a need, so if we could just talk about that for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Help me understand.
And so yes, ultimately there is a need to get a transmission main from the Brunswick transmission line over to the corner of basically Sutton and Dorsey, which then takes that line back across to the other side, to the northwest side, across Highway 49, which gives us another crossing over to that side. It also reduces some velocity areas concerns that we have at peak demand, as well as I think there's a couple of sections of pipes that ultimately would need to be upsized. They don't need to be today, but if we have that in there, that could also reduce our need to have to upsize those pipes, again, related to velocities and flows, as our system kind of winds through the other side. So there was 3 decisions or 3 pieces that we looked at to decide not to install this transmission main at this time. The first 2 are really related to cost. First one is just cost in general. So, yeah, perfect opportunity to do it. There's no pavement out there. The contractor's already out there. It's pretty much a straight shot from A to B. Makes perfect sense. So the initial costs that came in August were about 20% more than I had anticipated, which gave me pause. Since then, it has gone up another 20%. So the cost itself is very concerning to me. The second component of the cost is the risk and liability related to delays. And it's not, because this project is not required for the development. They're installing all the 8-inch line. We're having them design or install a second main line, transmission main that just goes from point A to B. Having a 6-month delay, assuming best case scenario is we get the ductile iron in October, it runs right through the main drag that's being developed for the first phase of this project. Main road, and I don't know the name of it, that's going from Brunswick to Sutton.
Yeah, so I'm looking, we all have to
So
map.
look at that map. So, grab that real quick.
That's right, you get that.
So what you see on that map is all the pipelines that the developer has to install as part of their development. Those are all basically 8-inch pipelines for the most part. As you look to the right, and you see this is Brunswick Road, there's kind of that dark spot right there that you see on the right. So if you start right there and you go directly west, you can see the main road that kind of comes through and winds up all the way back to the corner of Dorsey and Sutton. Are you following that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
It kind of winds around.
yeah, the pipeline's not through all of it in this drawing, but it shows, so that transmission main would be in that roadway from point A to point B, which is the key piece of infrastructure that they install as part of their subdivision. So, because it's not needed for the project, we are into agreement with the developer to build this. Should our materials get delayed, should we run into rock or other unforeseen issues related to that, and it delays our ability to get that project done in a timely fashion, it could push us into winter. We all hope we get an early and wet winter, so if it starts raining and being messy in late October and November, the developer, my concern, is the developer could come back to us and say, look, I was ready to pave out and be done. Now you guys are making me wait 6 months until the weather gets better again. They're gonna come after us for costs.
So,
That's a big concern for me.
yeah, so my question though is that, what I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this was gonna be a phased development, and their first phase was down here at this corner of Idaho, Maryland, and Brunswick. And what I'm hearing you say is that if we were to install the transmission line, it would actually not impact that, it would go.
So they're installing, and I believe we talked about this, but I can't be 100%. They're installing all of the infrastructure at once.
That's right.
So the entire project's getting built. All the roads are being paved, all the infrastructure is being put in, all right up front. That bottom section there is just the first section that they'll actually develop the lots and sell them off. But all of the infrastructure is being done all at once, all being done this summer. So it will potentially impact their ability, again, because this main thoroughfare is the only way to get into even that lower subdivision section, it has to be done in order for them to be able to sell lots and start having people move out there. So that's a big concern for me. The third piece of the discussion is we have alternate routes. I thought this was a really straightforward and simple location, timing-wise, get a good price, et cetera. But there's 2 other options if you go to the north, just outside of this subdivision. That is all open land, vacant land, currently not developed. Actually, there's a portion of it that is owned by a developer, I think that did Timberline originally. They own a piece below. So there's an opportunity for us to go through that way to make the connection. The only issue with that is we'll have to work through the easements, et cetera, right? Because we don't have.
Right, well, and there's multiple property owners there versus one property.
Correct. The other option is to go to Idaho, Maryland, which is just to the south. So that would go through some pavement, at least on Idaho, Maryland. There's probably plenty of shoulder on the Sutton side to be able to install the pipe. It is a little bit longer, but that's another possibility. So what are the costs right now? You're very high. Now, 3 years from now, if we can get this done, 2 years from now, or 4 years from now, we don't need it today, but we do need it at some point.
When do you think we would need it by? Like, let's, this whole thing will get built out in whatever time period. But when would you anticipate, the next 5 years, or 3 years, or 10 years?
So the next 5 would probably be ideal. Just because we can function now, this adds redundancy to our system as well by having another crossing across Highway 49, which is nice to have, but not necessary to function.
Part of our challenge is without a current capacity fee study that outlines all of the projects we need to improve our system, improve the flow of the system, but also accommodate new areas of development. It's hard for me to make a recommendation on priority-wise as to the importance of this project without understanding the importance of all the other projects. And given that the cost is fairly high, we do anticipate construction costs to go down as soon as there's a recession and massive housing development stops, which typically happens, and we do see the construction costs bottom out.
Well, we also did look at some other options, right? We did look at, could we potentially use PVC, which has a shorter lead time than the ductile iron. The problem with that is, of course, the interior diameters of the pipes. So by going with a heavy PVC, which is like a 14 to 305 pressure class rating, the walls get real thick, which means our flow area gets smaller, which means in order to get the flow area that we need, we have to go to an 18-inch.
Right.
So when we looked at an 18-inch, there's only a couple folks that even make that a little bit more of a wonky size, and nobody's planning on running any material, and 2,400 feet of pipe ain't enough to make a plant want to do that. And the cost, ductile iron just in pipe, is about $80 a foot. That was quoted at 142.
And why do you think that in 5 years the cost will be less? I guess that's the part that I just can't get my head around.
So as you remember before, when we were kind of going through this boom, and then we had the bust.
Yeah.
And then that was actually a good time when we were told we needed to start spending more of our reserves because we had too many in there. We were getting really good projects at a very good price because you had contractors that were hungry, you had material that was more readily available, and the prices were less. Right. I mean, labor typically doesn't go down.
Labor did go down at that time period, actually. It went significantly down. So what's driving costs high right now is the labor shortage. So a lot of these add-on projects like this, they're building them with pulling crews in on overtime. The other thing is the supply chain is massively clogged right now. And so I do think that we're seeing the highest of construction costs. They should be going down. Just in the past 3 days, bigger and bigger banks are calling for a recession.
I think your other point about the priority of this project versus other projects, I feel.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Yeah. And that's my biggest problem. Doug's well versed in this conversation because we've had it about 5 times. Because I was leaning towards the same consideration that Director Heck was, but it's very difficult for me to make a recommendation to the board, a sound recommendation to the board, to go ahead and build this particular project, even though we do feel the costs are high and there's supply chain issues and it's going to cause delays, without having the context of the priority of the other projects. I don't have a good sense without having the capacity fee study done as to whether that would be a good immediate expenditure of our funds.
Right, and I can imagine in some instances, we don't have really other viable options to route this kind of pipeline, and you've presented that we have 2 options. So that is also, to me,
yeah, that's compelling. I did not know that piece. That's why I wanted to have the discussion.
Yeah, we also looked at what would be the possibilities of us contracting directly with the contractor, getting multiple bids, so that we're comfortable coming to the board with the costs associated with it. Again, the risks associated with that are very high, because now you've got 2 contractors in there, with one saying, I'm supposed to be working at that spot today, and you're in there, which means, no, I can't, which means I'm gonna be sending my owner a change order for delays, et cetera, right? It just added more complexity to the project, and the fact that we don't have to have it today is not a do or die situation for us at the moment.
Yeah. So I like to plan ahead, but if we're planning ahead 5 years, then
I'm more inclined to wait it out. I'm trying to get a 12-inch well drilled, and there is a shortage of 12-inch pipe for well drilling. I appreciate the bank saying that we're probably going into a recession, especially with interest rates going up. But the very real possibility of stagflation, and where we may see increased costs on everything, especially if you sense that the demand or the supply just may not be there. So I'm kind of willing to go with you and just wait, and see what, throw the dice, see what happens here, because, yeah, it was a nice, simple project until you factor in the fact that we may delay a development, which we cannot do, and then not be financially responsible. I had another question on the 8-inch that the developer's putting in. So at 30 PSI, what's the PSI on that? Because the 30 PSI only carries about 800 gallons a minute.
Oh, it's greater than that. I don't know the specific number, but when you first they're coming off of the transmission main, we're actually installing a PRV, they're knocking that down, and that's what's feeding this development. And we'll also go back across the street and feed the other side, which is gonna be developed at some point. I don't remember what the specific working pressures is for that, but it's probably in the 60 to 70 something range.
Yeah,
typically what we would knock it down to.
And the fire hydrants operate at
that PRV pressure.
right there. So and what is a fire hydrant capable of filling? 1,000 gallons a minute?
Sure. Depends on what kind of pressure and what kind of flow you got available.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, for me, it's not our responsibility on this 8-inch, but I always like to over-engineer.
Yeah, ideally, we like to design our systems as we move forward to have 1,000 gallons a minute of fire flow, but it's not necessarily throughout the system, even throughout the potential use section.
Okay.
If you're at a high spot or a low spot, right, the hydrant up on top of the hill is not gonna flow the same as the one at the bottom.
So did we budgeted this 16-inch?
No, we didn't. This would have been a request coming from capacity fee reserves that would have been paid, this strictly a transmission,
Okay.
it would have been paid out of capacity fee.
So it won't have any impact on what we're
Correct.
budget for this year.
Correct.
And I like the idea of putting it in context, because I'd like the backbone
Yeah.
extension program to be up there and considered also.
Got it in. Got it in.
Director Peters.
Yeah, I understand what we're saying today, but this project didn't just develop overnight. We were talking about this project in the engineering committee a long time ago, and this idea of taking advantage of putting this in the works for well over longer than last August. And so the direction was, yeah, let's just take advantage of that because it's a good opportunity. And so I guess my point goes to Director Johansson is that this is an opportunity lost. We could have bought the pipe. We knew we were going to do it. We could have thought we got a big old yard out here. We could have gotten it. We could have planned it. We could have let them know that. And I just think that we missed a really good opportunity. And I think because we drug our feet for whatever reason instead of executing the plan when we had it. And
So I hear what you're saying, but understand that this pipeline is going in infrastructure that the developer had to put in, which is all the grading and the roads and the creek crossings, et cetera. Right, us purchasing that pipe and then the developer going sideways, it left us with 2,400 feet of pipe that we would have to go back and deal with in the future, to try to go back in and get easements from the developer, et cetera. So while yes, we've been thinking about this for a long time, I've been talking to the developer, we're in a big piece, we're on the developers is the one that's driving our schedule.
That's a good point.
and we should be in the driver's seat. But, okay.
But we can't be, it's their
Yeah.
project.
Yeah,
You can condition project as the owner.
So just to make sure we're all on the same page, it still would not be a benefit to the district to start buying pipe associated with a developer-funded project because, as Doug just stated, they can go at any time and not develop at all. and we can be
Right.
stuck with a whole lot of pipe.
Right.
And then, you know, we're also still not taking this project in consideration of all the other projects that we possibly need.
Right.
So we,
Cumulative.
yeah, so we had, as the board had, committed to, we're going to put out a fee study this year for the capacity fee money. And so I think based off of that, then the board will be more well-informed to make decisions.
Well, I support this, and, I would move to approve the conveyance agreement.
Second?
Any further board discussion? Would anyone in the public like to comment on item 3G of the consent agenda, Loma Rica Ranch Phase Waterline Extension Conveyance Agreement, Starline the phone? All right. Madam Secretary.
I also want to thank Doug for having this discussion, because I've learned answers to my questions that I had, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I too really appreciated the points that you raised, walking us through the cost escalation, the conflict potential of the project delay and the exposure that gives the district, and the fact that we have these other alternatives. That background really helped me to understand the perspective that you're bringing forth, so thank you.
Doug? Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
Aye.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 6?
Aye. Thank you, Doug.
We got through our consent agenda in
Good job.
Well done, guys.
Good job. Good job, guys.
No.
No.
At this time, we'll take a short break. Right, we're back in session to move on to the general orders part of our agenda. Number 4A, Hemphill, Transportation Passage Project. Say that's right. Doug,
Yes.
you're on again.
Yes. Okay, so actually, I'm just here to pass it off for the moment. This is in regards to Hemphill, obviously the dam that we're gonna be replacing out there, this summer. And part of the EIR was, one of the options was to participate in the PCCP, which is Placer County Conservation Plan, which the district didn't choose to be part of back when it was formed. But we were looking to be a special entity to be able to utilize the fast tracking of the permitting process and some of those types of things. So that's what we're here to talk about today, and what I'm gonna do is hand this off to Tanya, who's the project manager for this project, and she'll walk us through it.
Okay.
Okay, Tanya, you're on.
All right, thank you, Doug. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Today, I'm before you to request the approval of participation in the Placer County Conservation Program for the Hemphill Diversion Structure Fish Passage Project, and also request that you authorize General Manager Hanson to execute a participating special entity agreement between Placer Conservation Authority and the district for this project. The PCCP permitting, or the Placer County Conservation Program, PCCP for short, permitting option was pursued for this particular project as it streamlines the timeline for permitting as well as the coordination for the agencies. This route allowed for a progression of the process so that we can actually construct the project starting this summer. As Doug mentioned, utilizing the PCCP was identified in the EIR as a permitting method. We also, as you may recall, we adopted a mitigation monitoring and reporting plan for this project, which identified mitigation under the PCCP. The PCCP staff, Greg McKenzie and Teresa Johnson, have been working with the district and our consultant, eCorp, attentively keeping the permit process moving forward, as well as the overall project. I'd like to note that they have been extremely responsive and cooperative in this process. They're, in general too, the agencies have been extremely supportive of this project. In order for us to utilize the PCCP, the district has to enter into an agreement for this particular project and pay the associated fee. Since posting of this particular staff report, further refinement has been made to the agreement as well as the fee. So I noted in the staff report that we expected the potential fee to be up to $120,000. The associated fee is actually now $55,511 and some change. The administrative costs still remain at that $15,000 reflected in the staff report. So that would bring the potential permitting fees to a total of $61,835. So the draft agreement will be presented also to the Placer Conservation Authority, or PCA, on May 25th. So after they approve this PCE agreement, so the participating special entity agreement, General Manager Hansen will be able to execute the agreement. So based on our conversations with Greg McKenzie at the PCCP, we are confident that this agreement would be approved. It may have some refinement in the language, but we don't expect any major changes. So at this time, I'd like to address any questions that you may have. Greg McKenzie is also on the phone if you have specific questions that I cannot address about the PCA or the PSE.
Hey, Tanya, just a point of clarification. Did you say that it was going to their board on the 25th of May? Or April? 29th.
No, it's May 25th. So the they will be holding a special meeting on May 25th to consider this agreement. However, we have submitted our PCCP application, and they have graciously proceeded with reviewing that concurrently.
It's just a clarification to the board. We're currently out to bid right now on the project. And so we've tried to put everything that we know potentially could be in there in terms of permit and issues related to that in terms of impacts to the contractor. But if for some reason something else comes about at the last second, that would be something that potentially impact the contractor, we'll have to work with them with regards to that, because the bids are going to be due prior to the 25th.
Bids are due prior to the 25th.
Yeah, to be able to get them on board, bring it to the board for consideration in May, to be able to get them to start working in mid-June. They can start in-stream work in June 15th, I believe it is. And so we need somebody on board to start buying material and getting ramped up and get ready to hit the ground running on the June 15th.
What's been the bid period, and when did it go out, and when does it close?
Let's see, it closes on the 5th of May, I believe. Tony, you can probably.
The 4th of May. So, like, as I mentioned, the PCCP application is currently being reviewed. If there's anything in addition to requirements that would be added to that for the contractor, hopefully we would know ahead of time. We've been in conversation with Teresa Johnson and Greg McKenzie about the timeline of the project. So it's really just if the PCA, in reviewing the PSE, determines that there's an additional requirement for the contractor. But really the way that we organize our EIR and mitigation, we generally are able to predict pretty well what's required of the permitting agencies based on past experience.
I think it was a 4-week, Tanya, so it was like early April, April 2nd, 3rd, somewhere is when the bids went out. These were pre-qualified contractors, and you remember we pre-qualified the contractors before, so that list then went out to these folks.
Director Peters.
Hi, Tanya, this is Director Peters. You mentioned changes in and the budgetary impacts, and I didn't quite understand it. So right now it says that the 2022 budget is 4.025 million, and that the potential permit fees totaling 126,000 will be paid. And so is that 126 replaced with 61,835? It got cut in half, pretty much?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I understood.
How did that happen?
So part of it is we thought that the number would be closer to that number that we're talking about, but until we got some better confirmation, when we put the staff report together, we put more of a worst-case scenario, so that, you know, if the number had come back, if we put in 50 and then we came back and said, hey, by the way, it's 120, we just put in a more conservative number, hoping that we would have that information to be able to present to the board today.
Okay. So what's the 55,000, I'm sorry, what's the 55,511? I didn't understand what that number was for.
So
That is the, go ahead, Tanya.
the $55,511 is the associated fee to enter into the participating special entity agreement, the PSE agreement with the PCCP. So that fee would cover our impacts to the area, as well as this additional conservation, contributing to conservation amount.
Are those fees the ones that are identified in 5.41 of page 6 of the agreement? It says land conversion fee, special habitat fee, temporary effect, 55,000. How much
So
land is it? What are we talking about?
yeah, so the revised version would show that the, I'm trying to see if I have that in front of me, but it is within that 5.41 section. And pardon me as I flip through here. So in that 5.41 section in the revised version, the land conversion fee is 0.5 acre at $10,478 per acre. And then the special habitat fee is actually waived because this is a restoration project. The temporary effect fee would be 1.3 acres at $209.56 per acre.
1.2 acres at $209.50 per acre?
1.3 acre.
3. I see.
And
And what's
then-
the one-time payment, is that?
Yes, so the 5.42 section is the contribution to conservation. So that's a one-time contribution or one-time payment to the authority for $50,000, which is a contribution to meeting the mandatory PCCP conservation goals and objectives separate from the PCCP mitigation requirements.
And to correct me, Tanya, if I'm wrong, but that cost, all of the participating agencies contributed to that as part of being part of that PCCP.
Each,
So this is just.
yes. And
Okay.
Go ahead, Tanya.
yeah, so that you're correct, Doug. So each agency that belongs to the PCA is required to do additional conservation above and beyond what's required of the PCCP.
Okay.
There's some, Doug, Tanya, aren't there some permits outside of this that we're still acquiring that would draw?
Stream
bed
bed,
alteration.
stream bed alteration.
So I wanted to answer your question that there's also that which will draw on this budget item.
And that's, okay, so that's one of my next questions, so thank you, this. But also, so it's just the timing, so we approve this agreement, and then it goes to their authority on May 25th. Does that mean that the permits are executed on May 25th, or is there additional time after that, that now that we can, what's the timing with the actual permits in hand after May 25th? Is the May 25th giving us our permits?
Greg, can you answer that question?
Yes,
Hi, Greg.
good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Greg McKenzie. I'm the PCP administrator for the county and the executive director of the Placer Conservation Authority, which is the county, city of Lincoln, Placer County Water Agency, as well as the transportation agency. So those are the permittees that staff has been discussing. So yeah, above and beyond, just to provide some more context, those permittees have a commitment to conservation above and beyond mitigation. So it'll be one thing to mitigate for a project. This one, for all the right reasons, as a restoration project, really has no impacts. But it does have a commitment to conservation above and beyond that's shared by those permittees. So that helps us get there with our board to make sure, let's say Placer County Water Agency said, hey, wait a minute, let's not have this go forward. We don't want to give up an element of take coverage. In this case, I've floated this with them. They seem to be on board, just so that you're all assured that another water agency hopefully won't stand in the way here of this one. So yeah, May 25th was unfortunately the earliest we could calendar a date to get 3 board members at a special meeting, just given other board meetings and city council meetings, unfortunately. But I right after this board meeting, have to prepare the staff report, work it through council, get it out. So it does take some time, as you realize. So the goal is, assuming the application is complete, all the questions are answered, I'm sure it will be. All the state and federal agencies are giving a positive thumbs up that the design works. Basically, effectively, May 25th, the board approves it. We can then issue the permits we can issue. And so, let's say within a week, we should be finalized there. You still have the LSA, Lake and Stream Bed Alteration Agreement with the state. That timing is there, as well as the State Water Board, Regional Water Board's 401. Those are on different timelines, but in terms of the permits we control, being the 404 permit, the wetland permit, as well as the Endangered Species Act permits, yes, with a complete application, we should be able to issue this project its permits for at least the ones we control. So.
Oh, good. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much. And so Tanya, has the CDFW, has the 1600 or the LSA and the 401 permit been submitted to CDFW and the Water Board so far? What's the status of those outlying permits?
The 1601, the stream bed alteration agreement, that's complete right now. We're just, because of the electronic system, I believe Doug is getting authorization to sign that, so that should be submitted in the next couple of days here. As far as the water quality permit, that has also been submitted.
In a time frame of when it's gonna be completed?
So for the 401, typically they wait for the 404 to be authorized. So we expect that right after the PCCP gets their permit authorized, we'll get our 401. For the 1600 one, they are working also with the PCCP in unison. So once we get that submitted, they can start their review process as well. I would expect that as long as there's no hiccups, that we would get the permit around the same time frame. I've spoken to the person that would be drafting the LSA. They're very supportive of the project, and as soon as it gets submitted, I'm going to contact him to bring it to his attention, because he's going to work with us to make sure it goes through the process quickly.
I think that's important to know, right, that Tanya's been reaching out to the different agencies to keep them all on board so that we can streamline this. And like she said, both Greg and his team, as well as the agencies, have been very supportive and working through a much faster time pace than most folks, most projects go forward. So they've been very supportive. It's been very positive.
That's great. Really good to hear. And so we're thinking that to have the permit by the first week of June, roughly, and so the contractor can maybe mobilize and start getting on site. And you said water work would be done starting June 15th.
They can start on June 15th or after June 15th.
Any work on after June 15th?
With regards to in-stream work. So they could start working, doing some laydown areas and doing some of that, because I don't believe, and Tanya, correct me if I'm wrong, but, we were concerned about the black rail, but, I don't think we have that issue now, so in terms of potential delays to do some of the work off-stream. So we should be good to go.
Great. And are we still on track to be completed by October 15th?
Yeah, the in-stream work will be completed by October 15th. Some of the lead times for the fish screen, may be a little longer, but that's actually getting installed in our canal system, as well as the gate that we're gonna be used for measuring flows through the system. That work can get done outside of our irrigation season, and not be within the stream, so. The permits, I think, go until, is it the middle or end of October that we're supposed to be out of the stream?
Okay, so all the in-stream work will be done, and so no more flash forwards, no more.
Correct. We'll put a bypass pipe in that will bypass flows downstream, for continuing downstream, and then we'll have a bypass pipe that actually puts water into our canal as well. So they'll do a temporary coffer dam of some type that they'll install there, get water around it, and then we'll tear that structure. That'll be the first thing that happens is the flash forward.
That's fantastic, very exciting. It is exciting. Yeah, and so then, and then the next question is, what's the status of the post-construction monitoring plan? Do we have a plan in place? I know that, there's a lot of, are we considering utilizing, citizen monitoring or citizen science to implement that plan? Do we have a post-construction monitoring plan that's been prepared yet?
Tanya, can you give the status update on?
So yes, so for post-construction monitoring, we have a long-term management plan that we have committed to with regards to the grant. So for 25 years, we'll be monitoring the fish passage to ensure that it's basically doing what it's intended to allow for fish passage. For 2 of those years, we'll be monitoring the, I guess I shouldn't use the word monitoring, but we will be working in cooperation with hopefully some volunteer agencies to do fish counting or reporting. And with the fish counting and reporting, that's information that we will be sharing with the ECA as part of our permit. And then, of course, any requirements that we have for stabilizing the site, we will be monitoring that until the site's considered stable per our permitting.
How many years did you say fish counting and reporting?
2 years.
2 years, okay. Yeah, and you are considering utilizing some of the NGOs and the citizen science. There's a lot of interest on that ravine.
Yes.
So I think we can, the William Jessup University is there. They've expressed interest in participating.
Yeah, SARS as well as the others.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of interest. So I encourage including those people in the monitoring, because then it helps the community embrace the project. Okay, that answers all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
The directors? Good project, we're within budget. Great project.
Thank you, way to go.
I'm ready. I'm confused. I have one question about the budget. I was confused along with Laura, but you're trying to get there. All of these fees are coming out of the overall budget?
Correct.
They're not new money.
No,
No.
correct. It's part of the approved budget is $4,025,000.
Great. Okay, now.
Great job, everybody. I'm
Yeah.
excited. Let's keep going. Motion that we approve this. Let's get my motion straight. Approve the Nevada Irrigation District participation in the Placer County Conservation Program for the Hemphill Diversion Fish Passage Project, and authorize the general manager to execute a participating special entity agreement between the Placer Conservation Authority and Nevada Irrigation District for the project.
I'll second that. Okay. Any further board discussion? Would any member of the public like to comment at this time on this? Moving forward to the, I can't see this one. Start on your phone. Participation in the Placer County Conservation Program, that's right. Okay, seeing none, Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
Aye.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
very exciting.
Thank you.
All right, next item, 4B, job description, staffing changes. Jim Hanson.
All right.
Morning.
Thank you, President Beerwagon. So this item that is before you is a continuation of an item that Mr. Jones brought before the board on March 9th of 2022. Mr. Jones is a lucky bird right now. He is in the Panama, hopefully going through the canal maybe as we speak. So I'm going to fill in for him. So as the board is aware, on March 9th, we brought forward an item regarding the South Yuba Canal acquisition from PG&E, which includes the 17 miles of transmission, canal, flume. It's kind of a combination infrastructure as well as the powerhouse. And so at that time, on the March 9th meeting, we brought forward 6 job descriptions, requested the addition of 3.75 full-time equivalent staff people to the 2022 annual budget, and then requested an amendment to the 22 annual budget in the amount of $1.16 million for Fund 50, which is hydro operations, as well as a transfer of $180,000 from Fund 50, from the unassigned fund balance of Fund 50 to Fund 55 for proposed capital expenditures, and then an associate increase of $580,000 for the 2022 year associated with the powerhouse revenue. That would be added to Fund 50 as well. At that time, we received feedback from the board regarding the job descriptions that were proposed for 2 particular positions, and that was the staff analyst position as well as I was called a staff analyst, it's an administrative analyst position, as well as the senior administrative analyst. And so we're back before you today with revisions per your request. And the primary request was related to the inconsistencies and some of the overlap with the current management assistant classification. And so based off of your consideration, we went back and made more modifications to the proposed administrative analyst 1, 2, and the senior administrative analyst job descriptions so that they reflected a better differentiation of duties when compared to the management assistant. As noted, the management assistant classification is more assistant in nature, more secretarial in nature, whereas the administrative analyst position will be doing higher level work. So this proposed job description modifications, it speaks to our need to start to normalize classifications or job specifications across all departments. We have a lot of job descriptions right now and a variety of classifications that should really be in the same families, which does cause some issues when we are going through bargaining with equity between the different departments. So this will go some way to fix that particular issue. Along with the request for the approval of the job descriptions, so approval in the job descriptions in itself does not add positions to the budget. That is by separate action. So the separate action, you have 2 actions, or actually 3 actions before you. We're requesting approval of the 2 job descriptions. We are requesting the approval of 1 full-time equivalent administrative analyst position to the hydroelectric department. And then if it is filled, we would then at some point this fiscal year delete the full-time equivalent management assistant position within the hydroelectric department. Director Peters, during the last board meeting, she did bring up a couple of concerns related to the original action that was taken by the board in 2019. It was a budget amendment that was brought forward prior to my time related to the acquisition of the Deer Creek system. And that particular budget amendment at that time brought forward a request for, it was 6 additional positions that were to be split. Let me see if I have that right. Yep, it is. So 6 additional full-time equivalent positions were added in 2019 to the budget, which included 1 maintenance supervisor, 1 senior utility worker in the maintenance department, 1 project manager in the hydro department, 3 water system operators in the hydro department. And so when we went through reducing the full-time equivalent staff during the 2022 annual budget process, we essentially deleted those positions that were in maintenance, and they were no longer filled because they had only filled 2 of them at that time, and so they were addressed through natural attrition due to people leaving the district. With the hydroelectric department, it's important to realize that the job positions that were approved in the 2019 budget, but then also further approved at the last action that was taken on March 9th of 2022. We are not hiring or requesting positions for people that will only work on the South Yuba Canal. What we are requesting are positions that will essentially shore up the organizational structure within the hydroelectric department. With your previous action that you took, you addressed the primary issue that was occurring within the hydro department, and that they did not have that supervisory level over the field staff. It went from superintendent to senior and then field staff. So it is important that field staff does have some type of field manager out in the field for a number of reasons. And so that was taken care of during that time frame, which was the March 9th action. So we are before the board today only to request consideration of approval of 2 new job descriptions, as I stated. Those are for the administrative analyst 1-2 and the senior administrative analyst, and then the addition of the 1 full-time equivalent administrative analyst position, and then deletion of the management assistant position that's currently in the 2022 budget for hydro.
Thank you, Jennifer.
It does explain it very well.
Writing. It would have been nice to see a comprehensive plan in writing. So we're saying that we don't need, so what's the difference between a water system operator and a water distribution operator?
Is that before it?
It is not before us right now. So we're just talking about the administrative analyst positions.
All right, as far as the,
Go, sure.
sorry about that. I get lost
Please
there.
go.
Sorry about that. So this administrative analyst position is only for hydro. This position, this proposed, that we're gonna add this to hydro and delete the management assistant in hydro.
The job description, the board has, there's 2 kind of sides to this proposal to the board. One is to approve the job descriptions, which would be available for any department to utilize if the position itself was approved through the normal annual budget process. The second item is just related to the current hydroelectric department, and that is the staffing request.
So I know that we have management assistants, we have office technicians or office assistants, we have management assistants, now we have admin assistants. And you mentioned we have way too many job classes, job descriptions, that we have too broad and that we want to consolidate them. And looking at the administrative analyst, it sounds like the current MA is going to be promoted into an administrative analyst position in hydro, because otherwise we're going to delete her job, and so she'll have to find another job, which
Not necessarily.
I believe that these management assistants are doing, I think that the engineering management assistant, I think operations management assistant, I think maintenance of management assistant, I think they're all doing incredibly broad and analytical work for their individual jobs. And I don't think it's fair as 3 or 4 to elevate in hydro this one position and not just consolidate it and say, okay, office assistants are now gonna, because they're doing the less technical work, and now the admin analysts can start at rank 1. I think it creates favoritism in departments depending on, the surveys say hydro has had favoritism, and well, I don't know if hydro says in certain departments, it could be maintenance, I don't know what departments it was, but that it creates, it's just not fair to staff to have one person that's been doing the same job as these other several, and then now they get a promotion and get a new position. position, and then maybe the other department doesn't have the same budget or whatever. It seems allows for favoritism, and it seems like if we're gonna consolidate classifications, we should do it across the board. So these assistants can cover for each other, given one MAs or one analyst or MA or whatever they are out, another one could cover for them, and there's cross-pollination among the departments.
How you know what staff are doing as management assistants for our management team? I mean,
We
how
work with them.
do you work with them?
I talk to Pam all the time, and, I talk to Pam in operations.
So you know what they do on a day-to-day basis?
Not on a day-to-day basis, but I know that they all work hard, and it's replacing one management assistant with an admin analyst, and not any of the others. And so
we're making a lot of assumptions here. So we did speak with the union over this issue, and they are fine with the proposal. Additionally, we will go through normal internal recruitment process for this particular position, and that would be open to everybody.
and then what would happen to the person that's currently the MA?
That would be to be determined, if that person weren't to be selected.
So you have an open recruitment, internal only.
Correct.
So that's great. I like that process. I guess I would just make a general observation that as a board member, I do not feel that I have the knowledge or exposure to understand how people should be classified in the organization. I think your point is legitimate, Laura, that we as a board want to see equity within the compensation and classification system, but I, for one, would say I'm in no way in a position to make any kind of judgment about what any person should be classified. And I suspect that is true of all boards.
Amen.
Well, my biggest concern about it is that the management assistant, the top step makes $67,000 a year, and the admin assistant two makes $84,500 a year. So we're growing, and it's the ratepayers that are gonna have to pay for this. It's gonna require a rate increase to pay for this elevating in position. I just,
Yeah, that may or may not be true. There's no rate increase associated with this proposed action at all. In fact, the budget amendment was previously proposed in the March 9th item, and that was adopted. So you'll have to recall that when this item first came before the board and has been talked about, the original plan was for 11 full-time equivalent staff members to be increased as part of this project, and we've definitely decreased that by a lot. So I think that, my recommendation is the board take consideration of this item. I think it's a well-thought-out plan that both Mr. Jones as well as Kian put a lot of effort into. I have myself reviewed the proposed job descriptions, and I think that it's a really good opportunity for growth for our own current staff members. They all are able to apply, and then in the future, as things become more complex, it may be a consideration for other departments.
I think that this role of an analyst series is long overdue at the district.
I do too.
And I think it gives the management team more flexibility in how they use, kind of structure their teams. And I think it's a great addition. And I think based on the budget proposal for 2022, which the board adopted, I think the district did a very good job in controlling. From my perspective, this is the first time in the district's near-term history where I've seen a reduction in FTE, and that reduction came as a result of the managers coming forward and saying, I can give up these positions. I'll find different ways to work harder, work with our existing staff with the existing and growing workload. So I don't think this translates into a rate increase because, in fact, the district as a whole reduced by 8 positions.
14 full-time employees.
Yeah, that to me is a huge accomplishment that I don't know that we talked enough about, but But you see the trajectory, and you guys heard that, and I appreciate that.
We need to look at the overall.
Yeah.
I think, again, and in the budget, we need to look at the lifetime. I mean, when we move a person from a management assistant to an admin analyst and raise their salaries, that's for the next several years, I think, retirement. I mean, it's not just this year's budget. You have to look at it more comprehensively, and it's the ratepayers that are having to pay for it themselves. That's.
Yeah, I don't agree, but,
You don't agree that the ratepayers are paying for everything we do?
I think that we're, yeah.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Okay.
But I think
Complaining.
overall, staff and the team have done a great job of reducing our budget. And this is just part of that adjustment. And it's not that big of an adjustment compared to the overall picture. The overall picture is, job well done and it's excellent. So, yeah, our ratepayers pay for everything. We're very conscious of that. But to pick one little item like this and not look at the big picture is unfair.
I am.
So I'm ready to do a motion.
Okay.
So, everybody else? Okay.
I just make a statement. In the big picture, beyond that discussion is the absorption of the South Loop Canal, which we deemed necessary to do, and it comes at a cost. Right.
Yes, it does.
That's where this is all good. So, yes, those will come from ratepayers. They may have to pay some point down the road, but we had to have that system. Go ahead with your motion.
So I move to recommend to adopt resolution 2022-21, job description and staffing changes. Attachment A, approving the following. 1, addition of 2 job descriptions. 2, addition of 1.1 full-time equivalent administrative analyst 1/2 to the hydroelectric department. And 3, deletion of 1 full-time equivalent management assistant to the hydroelectric department upon vacancy of the position.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion by the board? Would any member of the public like to comment on this item, the job description and staffing changes being proposed today? Start on your phone. Okay, seeing none. Secretary, call the roll, please.
Division 4,
No.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 5,
Yes?
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye. Thank you, Jennifer.
All right, the second item should be really quick because it is just a follow-up of the previous item, and that is related to the adoption of the salary schedule that reflects the modifications previously approved by the board during the March 9th meeting, as well as just your previous action today. So as you'll recall, CalPERS does require by resolution to all compensation schedules to be adopted.
I would move to adopt resolution 2022-22, the position compensation schedule effective April 13th, 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded for the board discussion. Any member of the public like to comment on this item, the compensation schedule effective April 13th? Start on your phone. All right, Madam Secretary, will call the roll, please.
Division 4,
No.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye. Thank you, Jennifer. Next item. Sit here all day long, right? Squirrel Creek Siphon Replacement Project.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so, here today to make a recommendation, that you approve resolution, 2022-23, which, is, making an amendment to the 2022 annual budget, which includes the following: approval of a new capital improvement project, Squirrel Creek Siphon Replacement Project, at a total cost not to exceed $800,000, and then transfer of $800,000, whoops, there's a zero missing there, from the unassigned balance of Fund 10 to Fund 15. So, just a little background, this is a facility, that has been replaced in pieces over the years. There's, the crossing, and maybe I would point to the pictures to kind of get some flair to that.
Want to just stand out there with your fingers?
So unfortunately, in the CIP report, you have a couple pictures attached, one of which is the first one kind of showing this fountain shooting up in the air. And then you have a separate picture there that just shows water kind of spraying out at a kind of a fan spray definition. So unfortunately, the result of my finger touching the fan spray port turned it into the geyser that you see in the other.
Once you touch it, you got
I touched the thing and it went straight up.
you're not gonna get a job in.
Also, so in addition to the leaks that we have on the aerial siphon portion, on the aerial portion of the pipe, we also had another leak that you can see along the roadside with the water coming down, now it's further up. And so the portion that both these leaks have occurred on is in a section that we replaced in 1973. So the original siphon was prior to that. I don't know what the date was on the original siphon. In 93, we replaced section through the roadway and across the siphon. And then in 88, we replaced the upper portion or the downstream portion of the pipe. So that's, let's see, what's the best way to describe
Let me interrupt just one second. Do we have this, your photographs in a presentation so that the public?
We can pop it up and we can take a look at it.
I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
They need to see how bad it is.
Yeah. And just for the,
Pictures.
Let's do the photographs for now so that, because that's what we're discussing.
Yeah, there's one with moss growing on it. CIP does have some pictures in it.
Just use those pictures, Chris. No.
go through to get to the pictures.
By the way, I want to add while we're scrolling, thank you, Doug, and your staff for putting this in that whole format with the matrix and the scoring and the CIP, because that's the first thing I went and looked at, and then I looked at the CIP that we were given and looked at the scoring and it turns out it was scored the same as the North Day, right? And so I'm thinking, this looks worse than North Day. I mean, that was my initial sense, but the point is, we have this great process now, and I appreciate you guys following it, and yeah, it gives us a good way to compare projects. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll have that discussion here in a minute on why they're the same number, but what that's really done at the same time.
You have a laser pointer taking.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know if you can change pages. Yes.
No, probably not. So obviously, this is the geyser location here. Just so you know, since we've made the fixes and turned it back on, we now have another one of those, just like this one. Right out in the middle of the siphon, right above Squirrel Creek itself. So.
One hole or is it actual where?
No, just another spot that when we turned it back on, it decided to find another weak spot.
How much water are we spilling, wasting as a result of these leaks? And
Well,
should we close
luckily-
down the pipes to stop the leaks until they can fix?
So we did, when we identified the leaks this winter, this is not a facility that runs year-round.
Oh, good.
So it was turned off once the pipe was drained, because it's typically a full pipe, because it's an inverted siphon. Once it was drained, the leak stopped, so we didn't have continuing issues related to that.
We're pushing, what, about 1,600 acre feet through there in a year?
Yeah, so I think we sell about 174 inches of water.
Yeah.
Through this section it's part of the Rex Canal and the Quincy Canal. And then just the picture here to the right with the gentleman standing, you can see this is the other section. So just up the hill there, so if you were going on the Rough and Ready Highway heading towards Lake Wildwood or Penn Valley, it would be to your left. And so just above that, up in the country there, it was an area where we had a welded 22-degree angle. That's where that leak occurred for that bigger leak that you see flowing down through the road. So maintenance has already gone out there and fixed that. They welded a new custom 22-degree angle and put it in there. And so what I wanted to get to when I was talking about the different time frames, actually, why don't you go back one to the map real quick. Okay, so this is the inlet, right here down at the bottom, and it flows across Squirrel Creek, under Rough and Ready Highway, and back up to the other side. No, backwards. Chip, help me out. No, that's,
You
this
were
is,
backwards. You got,
yeah, this is the headworks here. Yeah, okay, sorry. Here's the headworks. As it flows down, across Squirrel Creek, and then back up to feed the Rex Canal, which ultimately feeds the Quincy. So, a third of it, so all of the pipe was original, and we don't know what that date was. A third of it was replaced, which is basically from here through the crossing, all the elevated sections. That was done in 1973, and that's the one you see with the moss covered and the exposed pipe. The upper section was done in 1988. That was also steel pipe that was installed. The last section is still the original pipe. So we did actually send in a camera on that upper section to see what that pipe in 88 looks like. It actually doesn't look too bad. And we did have some good material to weld to when we put the new fix in for the 22-degree angle. So again, this has been done through a piecemeal approach. And what we're seeing is both the leak up above the road as well as the siphon itself was all sections that were installed in 1970. So that's,
So Doug, are you proposing to replace it in its entirety and replace the 88 pipe as well, or tied to the 88?
So right now, we've got the budget to replace the whole thing, but what we'll want to do is actually take a better look at the 88 section of pipe to see if it's something that we can keep. Maybe we can just line it, put a new coating on the inside. Luckily, this facility is not something that runs during the winter time, so we don't have to worry about bypassing pipes, so we've got time to work on it. And so I've got the 800 in there as a worst-case scenario, but depending on what that looks like and some potential options, we may not replace the 88 section. Depends on ultimately how it's going to look, and whether we can, like I say, maybe coat it or do something of that nature. But we'll need to take some of it up, take a look at it as well, see how it's going. Let's see, what else was I going to mention?
So you're gonna talk about North Day and.
North Day, thank you very much. Okay, so this project, Squirrel Creek, was like a million other projects that we have, right? It's all infrastructure, and it was ultimately probably gonna be in our list, potentially even the 5-year CIP list. However, it wasn't having any trouble. So it may get the same score in terms of issues if it fails, emergencies, customers, et cetera. But North Day, we've had leaks. We've got root problems that are impacting the pipes. It's located outside the right-of-way, which makes it difficult to work on, et cetera. That's why that one was ahead of this one. Now that this one suddenly decided to fail in winter, it now gets moved up.
Right.
So had we been working on the 2022 budget right now, this would have taken the place of North Day, potentially.
Right.
And so these projects, as we rank them and we include them, a big portion of them just is the fact that we have more issues with one than the other. But suddenly one rears its ugly head and we have to accommodate that. So that's what we're.
I wasn't really questioning the wisdom of it, it was just really more of I'm grateful for having the matrix that you guys put together so I can compare it in my head about how bad is it or how much worse is it. And so
Right.
on. And so that was very helpful to have.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing that we're all gonna have to wrestle with, right? Is you may have a project, in this case, you've got a project that generates roughly $85,000 in gross revenue. And it's gonna cost maybe $800,000.
Right. That's the system that we've got.
You may have another one that has 15 customers, and it's still gonna cost you $800,000.
Right.
Right, and so that's just part of the nature of the.
But we just have to work with what we've got.
Exactly. Short of turning customers off, right? Right, the option would be to not work on this, it ultimately fails, and then those 43 customers get turned off. That's not why we're here to do business, so.
So I want to thank you for the explanation too, because I looked at these pictures and go, how come this didn't make the CIP?
I know, right? Holy cow.
Because it was quiet, right?
It was a sleeper, yeah, it was a sneaky one.
Now it's trying to do some stuff, and it's trying to do it all at once. So we're hoping to get through this summer. Band-aiding it. We put two bands already on the pipe that you can see, plus the fix up above the hill we dug out.
Doug's not allowed to touch it anymore.
And then can't touch it anymore. Now we've got another one that we're gonna have to try to figure out how to get out there, because we're not gonna let our guys walk on that pipe.
Yeah,
We're
no.
gonna straddle that pipe. And it's right out in the middle, and it's a very difficult location. The biggest trick on this one is just the location. It's a very
Zip line.
difficult spot, right along the highway. There's not a lot of room to set cranes and that kind of stuff. We're gonna have to be removing guardrails and doing a whole bunch of stuff. So it's gonna be, the trick will be the construction part of it, for sure.
You know, so when I look back at the CIP, the next question I had is, gosh, should we get an update? I mean, you know, because one of the things I appreciate about it tells you where, you know, in what status the project is, and North Bay was almost finished, and so on and so on. And I thought, I think the one I was looking at was dated in July or August.
We can, so what staff is planning on doing most likely at the next meeting is we'll be bringing back essentially, you know, your infamous rollover from, so this will be from the 2021 budget. So we'll talk about any projects that are still being completed in 2022, and we'll provide you new amended fund balances for consideration. And then we can give just a real, I'm not quite sure we'll be able to get ourselves together in the week and a half before we publish. But we could bring back an update on, are you talking about the 2021 capital or the 2022 capital where we're at?
Well, the one, you know, and I apologize, because I don't remember exactly the date of the one, because there's been several versions. And so the one I was looking at had a date of August or something. And so I was thinking, oh, it would be nice to get an update on where we are on the CIP program itself. And what have we done, what's finished, what drops off, what comes back on. And
We can do that for sure. So what
it
we'll,
doesn't have to be in the next week.
yeah, well, I want to bring the rollover to you.
Yeah.
So we'll bring the rollover, and then we can review the ones that were adopted formally in 2022, and then you'll have a full set.
Yeah, then we can just.
Yep,
see
that's
where
fine.
we
Does
are.
come with an encumbrance?
With the rollover? Yeah, so the rollover, we did somewhat take consideration of them when you go into budgeting. You make some projections for the next year's beginning of fund balance, so we did take some consideration of it. But as we've closed our books now we know exactly what hit 2021, and now what will hit 2022, so you'll see all that.
And then, we have spent a small amount of money, a couple $1,000s. We had a consultant, environmental consultant go out there to see if we were gonna need, what kind of document that we would need. And all the work that we can do is outside the ordinary high water mark and outside of the identified watershed location. We're still gonna probably have to get an LSA because we're within the overall, but we're not gonna need a bunch of permits, and so, it's an exempt project, so.
Even better.
Just replacing in kind, and we plan on using the original steel structures that are there for the site. We may have to beef them up a little bit to make sure they stay standards, but the foundation on the one down in the creek is actually very good, so we don't want to have to go in and mess with that at all.
Great.
Thanks. Ready for a motion?
I would just like to make a comment, which is, I really appreciate the pictures. You know, I mean, gosh, they speak 1,000 words. My other comment / suggestion is that these kinds of pictures and story that's told by this is something I think we need to push out into the public. If not simply listing it I think putting it on the website is one step, but people don't appreciate, number one, how an aged facility manifests itself with things like this, and that the cost, really, I mean, $800,000, that's a big chunk of change. And people don't, you know, they think of water as being what you turn on the tap for, what you get through your miner's inch orifice. And this is part of what we're paying for. And so I think that we need to make a better connection between our repair and replacement and maintenance kind of activities with, here's your fee, your rates. It's not just turn on the tap or get your irrigation water. So, sure. I think this is a great story, and these are fabulous pictures to say, holy moly.
And it has a payback in 10 years.
If we looked at it that way, yeah. But I mean, this is what's all over the district.
Yep.
It's the South Yuba Canal we've now inherited. It's the story we need to tell, so people appreciate that it's not just about the water itself, how we get it here.
A lot of hard work.
A lot of hard work and a lot of really critical infrastructure.
So I move to adopt resolution number 2022-23, Squirrel Creek Siphon Replacement Project, approving the following. 1, an amendment to the 2022 annual budget that includes the following. A, the approval of a new capital improvement project, the Squirrel Creek Siphon Replacement Project, for a total cost not to exceed $800,000. B, a transfer of $800,000 from the unassigned balance of Fund 10 to Fund 15.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any more, board discussion?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
We're transferring $800,000 from the unassigned balance of Fund 10. What's the balance of the unassigned balance?
It was provided. Yeah, so it was, so go to the fiscal analysis section, and so, yeah.
$9,318,000.
So the unassigned fund balance is the fund balance that is not associated with reserves.
It's associated with staffing, it's associated with...
No, so when we go through and do the budget appropriation, you have the budget for 2022. So you start the year, right? You have your entire fund balance, which includes a lot of things. If we're just gonna talk cash, purely cash, your fund balance essentially includes your reserves and then any money that's not budgeted. And so we funded the reserves, and then we had an amount of money left over. And then we have another pot of money, which was the total approved budget for Fund 10. When you make budget amendments, you're taking it out of the unassigned fund balance. The reserves are still sitting there. Reserve money should not be taken from unless the board makes a specific finding by resolution that it is consistent with the reserve policy or the intention of the reserve, and or there's some overriding consideration. And so when you're looking at, from a board perspective, it's always very important that you keep an eye on that unassigned fund balance when you're making amendments, because that really is your extra cash that we can spend for these ancillary items that always will come up through the year. And so that's why you always kind of want to have a little bit of an unassigned fund balance to deal with these kind of issues.
And you budget to put more into that every year?
No, not necessarily. It's a decision that is made in conjunction with how much you want to reserve.
Right.
The less you reserve, you could say, I'm gonna cut my reserves in half. I'm gonna increase my appropriations and my unassigned fund balance. I don't recommend that you do that. But we're starting to talk about fund balance in a more traditional sense because it'll give you greater oversight of the district's finances.
And flexibility.
It does give you some flexibility, but also allows you to know, okay, where are we at? How's our checkbook really looking?
Yep.
So our net income is another way.
Another way.
That other people maybe have experience. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, any further board discussion? Any member of the public like to comment on this item? Resolution number 2022-23, Squirrel Creek Siphon Replacement Project. Start ready to vote. Seeing none, Madam Secretary, you call the roll, please.
Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
Yes.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye. Thank you, Doug. All right, next, item 4E, repeal declaration of emergency of COVID.
I will handle this one. So as the board is aware, March 26, 2020, the board of directors of the district made a emergency declaration through the adoption of a resolution, which was very consistent with almost every agency around. And this is in response to the COVID-19 emergency. So you recall back then, that's right at the beginning of the emergency. Emergency resolutions do a couple of things. One, they can provide special powers that are not otherwise provided for in board policy to allow the general manager to make more immediate decisions as needed. So the board policy or the emergency declaration that was adopted by resolution did allow for some of the expenditure restrictions to be lifted due to the emergency, but it also placed a prohibition on water shutoffs. So when customer is behind on payment of their water bill, specifically a treated water customer, there's a process that is governed by state legislation that requires notification prior to shut off. A certain period of 60 days has to pass for non-payment. Then they're notified, and Aurora's going to correct me if I'm wrong, they're notified and they have 30 days to pay? 10 days to pay, then they get the shut-off notice.
They get the shut-off notice so they get a courtesy reminder at 45 days, they get the shut-off notice at 60 days, and if they fail to pay or make a payment arrangement, would be turned off at 70.
So that process was suspended by board action. It was also at that time, it was suspended by executive order by the governor.
Yep.
So the governor lifted that part of his executive order, so utilities are allowed to now turn water off again. And so because, for a couple of reasons, I do not feel that, although there are still public health issues and there's still considerations to be given from a public health perspective, I don't feel that NID is in a state of emergency related to COVID, and I don't feel that it's necessary for the general manager to have any special authorities as the situation currently exists. Because under current board policy, for example, if there was a major emergency related to the coronavirus, and I had to act immediately, I still have the authority to take those actions and then come back to the board later. So what I'm getting at is I don't need this resolution anymore for anything that would be a likely emergency action taken by the general manager. What we also would like to do is start the normal process of water turnoff. One of my concerns is getting that people are starting to have a very significant financial liability to the district, which is just going to be very difficult for them in the future to pay off. We have applied for some of the water arrearages programs through the state and have been successful in obtaining some of those monies for low-income folks to have some of their water bills forgiven and the state reimburse the district. So we have been, Aurora's team did a great job going through all of the red tape to get those monies. So we have taken care of a lot of that part of the low-income folks that had a fairly significant arrearage on their bills. And so now we are asking the board to terminate the emergency and rescind the declaration of emergency, which will remove all the emergency powers, which I wasn't using anyways, but also will allow for the district to start the shutoff process once again. One of the challenges with water shutoffs or people with delinquent bills, ultimately the rest of the ratepayers have to pay for those bills for the non-payment. They're absorbed in one manner or another. In the district, since we do have the ability as a special district to place liens on properties, we can go through that process if they are in fact the property owner. But we do feel that it's time now to reinitiate that process.
So you said that it falls to the rest of the ratepayers to cover this. My understanding is every year we do assign it to the property taxes. I didn't know that the ratepayers paid for. I thought that they collected it and at the end of the year they assigned it to the property tax bill.
Yeah, unless I'm mistaken, Dustin, you can correct me. Under the governor's most recent action, rental properties get. Yeah, we do that, but if you're a rental property and your account's under not the owner's name, it's a little bit of a different conversation.
You're both correct.
Yeah.
We did last
We
June
did the
or May.
liens about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I remember doing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But so if they continue to not pay, we will not receive any revenues until such time their house is foreclosed on or sold at auction.
Yeah.
Yep.
It only creates a lien.
Yeah, it creates a lien, and you're getting your money back is a very long process.
Right.
So from that perspective, the other ratepayers do pay for it.
Entertain a motion or a comment?
I just have a question on the delinquent accounts. Those are all treated water customers? There's no delinquent raw water customers?
Good morning, Aurora.
Good morning.
Jump right up there.
We do have some delinquent raw water customers. Because we just started the billing process for the upcoming season, all of those customers were switched to an inactive status.
Okay,
In most cases, that has triggered payment from those customers.
okay. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, good. I think this is good.
Do you need a motion? Are we ready for a motion? Okay, well, I would make a motion approving, to repeal declaration of emergency of COVID-19, adopt resolution number 2022-24, repealing the March 26, 2020 declaration of emergency for COVID-19, and direct the general manager to take appropriate action to implement this resolution.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further board discussion? Any member of the public like to comment on this item, repealing the declaration of emergency of COVID-19? Start on your phone. Seeing none, Madam Secretary, to call the roll, please.
Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
Yes.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye. Thank you. Jennifer, and I see you're up next again. Item number 4F, establishing district policy ad hoc committees.
Thank you, President Beer-Wagner. So item 4F was in response to a directive received from the board when the board took consideration of removing the standing committee policy from the board's suite of policies. And that was direction to establish an ad hoc committee policy. So as been our current practice, when we are bringing forward a policy for consideration, we do bring forward a draft policy for input. We receive that input, and then we'll bring it forward for full consideration at a subsequent meeting. The ad hoc committee policy is pretty brief in nature, simply due to the nature of ad hoc committees. So as you'll recall, the ad hoc committee is a special committee appointed by the board president and taken into consideration by the board for one-time items. So these would be items such as water rates, or, we could do anything, watershed, or whatever the board so desires. They are committees that don't have a consistent meeting date. They are committees that consist of less than a quorum of the board, which would only be 2 members, and they are not subject to the Brown Act. And so the policy before you, it would be a new policy, and it's referred to as ad hoc committees. So included in the policy is the purpose of the policy, assignment, how the assignments are made, types of committees. So these are kind of examples of types of committees that would be considered an ad hoc committee. And then the committee meetings, and this is one item that is important to note, that there was a pretty intense discussion regarding the Brown Act, as well as whether or not minutes would be taken. And so I tried to address that as best as I could, because the answer isn't very simple and straightforward. It really depends on what the committee is for. There are some situations in which an ad hoc committee could be formed for purposes of settlement of some type of legal issue. And in that situation, those conversations are typically stipulated by both parties to be confidential, and so there would be no minutes. And as well, all the minutes, if they were minutes prepared, would be posted on the website.
So are we covered enough by that paragraph deciding which one of these is open to the public or not? Are we?
We could add clarity if you like, but
Yeah.
by definition, an ad hoc committee is not subject to the Brown Act.
Okay.
Now, by tradition or board action, board direction,
Okay.
you could make it subject to the Brown Act, which you have done for your water rate
Right.
committee in the past, as an example.
So that's left to our discretion at the time of formation of the committee. What is more? Okay.
Good.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Doodles.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Under purpose, at the end of the paragraph, it says that the ad hoc committee is dissolved when their specific task is completed, or at the end of the fiscal year, whichever comes first. And I thought, well, what if a committee's formed in November? Then so my question is, might it be equally effective to say until the you know, the.
Task is complete?
Yeah, the task is complete.
I think that only speaks to, and this is totally up to the board, whether or not with a new president coming in, whether or not you would like the new president to have the opportunity to appoint new people to the ad hoc committee or not.
Okay.
And that's simply whatever the board desires. So we can clarify that based off of your direction.
Okay.
So my direction would be that you have continuity and historical reference with an ad hoc committee that you don't want to interrupt and have, you know, like inserting two new players in the game, and they don't understand how you got to that point.
Well,
So,
we had Director Beerwagen and I were on an ag ad hoc committee, and we were told that because it was a new year, the committee was no longer valid or something like that. And that we shouldn't be on it, and so that's kind of a.
That's true, but that was under,
that.
that was PR, or PJ, pre-J.
No, it wasn't.
It
No.
wasn't?
I don't remember being dissolved over the calendar.
No, we actually had a public conversation about that. And so at that time, we had talked about, staff had connected with some of the agricultural
That's right, we
folks.
changed it.
And we did.
We
It was,
changed
and it
that.
was done in a public meeting. Staff did not kick you off the committee.
I remember that now, thank you.
Yeah.
I was misremembering.
So I would recommend, if everybody agrees with Director Johansson, that we just remove the portion of the sentence that ends with "or at the end of the fiscal year," whichever comes first.
I would think that's correct.
Okay.
You do have a hand raised from the public.
Okay, thank you for noticing that.
Oh, I was hoping we'd hear from Mr. Noel, he always had good things to say.
Any more board discussion? Okay, Michael Hillwell, go ahead.
Hello. I'm kind of a stickler on the Brown Act, and I view the Brown Act as being a minimum of what an agency does in order to be transparent and provide the public with the information they need in order to participate intelligently. And that the actions be taken by people who are accountable to the public. So on the issue of scheduling meetings of ad hoc committees, I would support having it done on the basis of a majority of the board or the board president, but I would drop the general manager. I think the meetings should be called by the board or the board chairman. The other area is concerning the confidential meetings and they not being noticed. You notice closed sessions currently, and I believe that these ad hoc committee meetings should be noticed the same way. The public wouldn't participate, but I believe that the public needs to know that the meetings are taking place. And so I think they should be noticed. And the same way you don't provide minutes of the results of closed sessions, I believe that you should report out at the end of a meeting of an ad hoc committee, even if all you're saying is staff was directed to proceed as determined by the board or by the ad hoc committee. So I'd like to see those two changes. One, the general manager dropped from scheduling meetings because I believe that should be a board prerogative. And two, adequately noticing that a meeting is going to take place and that action was taken at the committee meeting. So thank you for considering these. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. Any other member of the public like to comment on this item? Proposed policy addition for ad hoc committees. Start on your phone.
I have a comment. I like what Michael said about the noticing of ad hoc committees, because it does let people know what's kind of going on in the background, if you will, because a lot of times this stuff is background. And when we notice it, we could say, this is not a public meeting or whatever, you know, there would be some caveat to it. But I think a notice of an ad hoc and the purpose for it, you know, there will be an ad hoc committee meeting to discuss labor or whatever, labor negotiations on this date. Public is not
invited the public to.
I think that would be addressed at the time we decide whether this ad hoc
I
committee.
do.
Ad hoc committees are for
Yeah.
the purpose of collecting information, not for making decisions, first off. If we've already delineated, we're going to decide, we're going to notice a meeting, at that point, that triggers in that stuff, and the others, I don't believe, because of their fact-finding, need to have public hearings. So,
It can be a little complex in dealing with other agencies as well.
Because, why? Because these are sometimes involve other agencies,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I agree as President Beerwagen that I think that it's best to take consideration of that particular noticing issue at the time of formation of the committee.
And the board's still always receiving this information and directing the process.
Yeah,
So
I
you're saying
think
we
that's,
have discretion?
Yeah,
yeah.
you need discretion over it.
The item comes back to you, is what
It comes
this
back.
is saying.
There's no action taken. The ad hoc committee has no jurisdictional authority.
Right.
I have a comment on the other point Michael raised on the general manager not being part of setting a meeting. I think from a practical point of view, as an example, with the labor discussions, the management was really directing that process. They had a lot of background work going on that they were doing, and then when they were ready for Ricky and I to become part of the discussion and we had topics, then they set the meeting. It wouldn't have worked for Ricky or I to decide, well, we need to have a meeting in 2 or 3 weeks, because we didn't have to do any of the heavy lifting. The staff were doing all the heavy lifting. And I can think of too, with like the South Sutter Water District discussions that we'll be having, is that management, again, is doing background work and is going to be in the position of understanding when that conversation is appropriate to come back to the ad hoc committee. So I just would say, I think there's going to be times where it makes perfect sense for the general manager to be taking the lead in setting the timing of meetings.
I would agree, and so for Michael, I would agree about that. As a practical matter, the general manager does need that discretion to set those meetings, because there is so much that goes on behind the scenes that working with staff that we don't see.
He wants to talk again. Michael Hill, do you want to comment again?
Well, I'm like a little clarification. So the direction that you're looking at is determining whether an ad hoc committee meeting is going to be noticed will be made at the time you create the ad hoc committee.
Correct. Mm-hmm. I think that's.
Well, then I would suggest that that should be in the policy. Because currently the way the policy reads, if I'm reading it correctly, is that they won't be noticed. So I don't want your policy to be that they won't be noticed. I want your policy to be that you're going to make a decision at the time that you create the committee.
It's already addressed in there, so if you look at, point 4, it states meetings that are determined to be open to the public will be noticed in accordance with Brown Act standards in order to maximize public transparency.
And some ad hoc committees will have multiple meetings.
Yes.
I think Michael is saying that even when, let's say it isn't an open meeting to the public, he's still requesting that it be noticed.
Mm-hmm.
As a
That's
closed session.
correct. That's correct. It's that the public needs to know that the meetings are taking place.
I agree. I would agree, Michael. I disagree. And we're getting some disagreement and stuff.
It's a legal consideration, and I highly recommend that you do not agree to that without understanding the actual committee you're talking about. I think that's something you take up at the time of the committee.
An example of South Sutter Water District negotiation.
Right.
That's
So we would say that's an ad hoc discussion, not subject to the Brown Act. If you volunteer to make it subject to the Brown Act, we're posting the agenda, which is what Michael's suggesting he would like. But then you're also making the facility open to the public to comment upon the closed session item, and then you keep them out. And keep in mind, in a litigation setting, you may be dealing with another party that has strong objections to, for whatever reason, to even making public the idea that they're talking settlement with NID.
Other entities such as South Sutter may not be talking to their ratepayers about any of this and don't want any of this publicly noticed. It just makes it very difficult for us to be able to do our jobs effectively and protect the district from legal risk and or coordinate on sticky issues with other agencies. They probably are not going to want to do it.
Can you draw a line for me, Dustin? Because you assumed by simply having a thing on our webpage that ad hoc committee regarding South Sutter Water District meeting will be on whatever, April 30th. Does that necessarily mean that that the public is invited?
Well, you'd have to modify how this currently reads.
That's exactly.
Modify this.
You're making the
Sounds like a
call.
good idea.
Yes or no, are these ad hoc committee meetings going to be subject to the Brown Act or not? You're making the call at the time the ad hoc is formed and then populated. And that's what your language reflects. What you're saying, Director Heck, is that there's potentially some middle ground here where
Yeah, I was wondering.
you could do that. I still think there are going to be potentially situations where just true confidentiality is needed.
Mhm.
And that, if that's the case, we may not have board members involved. That would be the outcome. We would just deal with it at a staff level and.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, all right, well, gosh, I can foresee, just in a little corner of where it says meetings, upcoming meetings, and then you would have this list and dates, and then you would say, South Sutter, for that example, not open to the public.
Well, I guess you have to think about what the point of it is. So I don't see an upside. The public's already notified that the South Center ad hoc committee would be formed, and it's not going to be a public meeting because it's subject to legal confidentiality. I'm not sure that it's necessary because you could draw this into a really sticky legal situation, and you got people sitting in the parking lot wanting to know who the other party is. So some of those things just place the district in a really bad position, and I'm not sure what public benefit there is. I think it should be taken under consideration when you form an ad hoc committee.
Yeah, I think so.
And we have so few that we do that.
Yeah.
I would agree. I understand what you're saying, Michael, and I appreciate the intent of having transparency. I also think that given that these ad hoc committees that are closed to the public don't really have an opportunity for the public to engage, it apparently creates some legal stickiness and coordination stickiness. It creates staff work having to do noticing for a meeting that the public doesn't get to participate in. And I'm wondering if an alternative is that when we have ad hoc committees formed, that we occasionally give updates, maybe at the general manager's report, to say, we've had 2 meetings with the ad hoc committee on the South Sutter Water District discussions. Because really, there's no difference knowing it before or after. You only are knowing that it's happening. So there may be ways to give that short update, like we did with the labor. I think labor, we talked about it.
We did give updates to the board
Yeah.
and by design the public
Right.
on what was going on in the labor.
So I just would leave it as is myself, and then with the idea that the ad hoc, the Brown Act versus, the open to the public or not open to the public is discussed when the ad hoc committee is formed. Okay.
Make a motion.
We have no motion, we're just having input, and then we'll bring it back. Yep.
Could jump there.
Any further input from the board or the
I think that it doesn't need not be noticed, but I like the idea, because people want to know, are we meeting this? Are we meeting with South Sutter? Are we following up on what, at the hearing, at there, was gonna meet every 2 weeks or something? Well, have we been doing that? I think people want to know that. This is not what the meeting was about or what was discussed, Just, is it taking place? And so after the fact, it's just as easy.
Yeah, you know, and along that point, as a board member who's not on the South Sutter Ad Hoc Committee, that would be interesting to me too, so.
Yeah, I think we need to address this as each ad hoc committee comes up. With
Yeah.
South Sutter, it's probably not that problematic. There could be issues where that would be problematic. I think we should just address it on a one-off.
As it comes up,
Yeah,
comes up.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
okay.
Me too.
So I didn't hear a whole lot of changes, there is a typo in there. We have a ham hock committee.
And then you got the strike at the end of the fiscal year.
Yes, and the strike at the end of the fiscal year. Thank you for that reminder.
Whatever comes first,
Right.
also included.
So then, oh, sorry.
Okay. You have sufficient direction.
I think so.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 4G.
So this is the last item of your agenda. We do have lunch, Chris?
Yeah.
So we can power through the rest of the meeting, which should be fairly quick, or are we?
For lunch? I didn't know.
It's a surprise, you can't spell it?
No, you can't spell it? No, not from over here.
You can't eat it, you can't have lunch, so you can guess what it is.
We have lunch?
Oh, we know how long it takes. I think we could power through. Okay.
Power through.
So draft policy 5040 was requested by the board to clarify the board actions and decisions. So as you'll see, we took the current policy and made some red lines to that policy, and now it's just up for discussion. So we tried to identify, I'll provide a little context. We tried to narrow in some of the vagueness of the policy, and try to add some of the things that the board is absolutely responsible for doing. What I did not do is duplicate requirements. So for example, there's a procurement policy that provides specific amounts. I didn't put all of those. I'm not going to duplicate from one policy to another, because that usually gets us in a little bit of trouble going, into the future. One of the things that happens when you have too many policies or they're too complex and intertwined, you end up having a lot of conflicts later on. You have a lot of inconsistencies, and nobody really refers to the policies because they're too onerous to even start remembering. So keeping all that in mind, I tried to modify this for some of the input I have received. And so as previously, this is only for discussion and input. Based on your input, then we'll bring it back. So with that. And one of the things I did want to bring attention to, so 5043.3, this is items that receive direction by consensus. So we have to be, items for direction are items that typically need subsequent approval if they're budgetary policy approval. The board cannot, by consensus direction, provide direction to do something that requires formal action. So entering into a contract, you can make a direction for me to bring something back onto the agenda. You can make a direction for me to do something that's already within my authority already. I just wanted to make that clear distinction, because I have been having a little bit of concern with the breadth of conversations we've been getting during a specific portion of our agenda under the director's business. I just want to just bring it up a little bit, and it's for your protection and the district's protection from a Brown Act perspective, and it's also for the public, because if they don't know we're going to talk about it, they don't know to participate at that time. So I did try to hash that out a little bit in this 5043.3, because I thought it would be a good opportunity to maybe all get on the same page about what that specific portion of the agenda is for.
I have about 3 additions
Okay.
I'd like to consider. So starting backwards at 5043.3, I would like to see any direction by consensus be reflected in the minutes.
And that's already in the minutes policy.
It is?
Yeah, because if that was any summary, board discussion is not summarized, individual board discussion is not summarized in the minutes, but unless it is by consensus.
Okay,
Direction.
so that is already
Yep.
going to be covered?
Yep.
Okay. Then in 5043.1, President blah, 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 a voice vote may be requested, and I also, again, same comment that that direction should be reflected in the minutes. Now, under 5043.1, is that duplicative of what we just talked about? We have a voice vote or consensus. It seems like that should be reflected in the minutes.
I think it should be, but I don't think it's necessary to put the policy. It's up to you. We're duplicating policies. And,
I kind of think it should be there that says, yeah, we're going to reflect that direction in the minutes. But I'll leave it to my colleagues to decide if that's important or not. Then I have just two more, and then I'll be done. So in these bullets under 5040.1, where you have approval of district's mission, vision, and strategic priorities, I wanted to offer that we say that the board will provide direction and approval of the district's mission, vision, and strategy. Because this just says approval, but it doesn't say how we got to the mission, vision, and strategic priorities.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So basically,
so we'll provide direction and approval of.
Direction and approval of, and then Director Hall had also a really good comment regarding that one, and provide high level oversight of implementation of those items. Yeah, and I think it's valid, so that the board really is responsible for that component of the district. Okay.
And then my other my last comment was maybe taken care of in the procurement, but I also felt like we should have some contract approval within the board actions and decisions. There should be a specific note that we also retain contract approval, and I'm not sure what that is, but if you're saying yours is going to be 35,000, we should say exceeding 35,000 or what. It seems like there should be a reference to the amount of we have contract approval authority over a certain amount, and beyond, under that, it with the manager.
I would recommend, because that is very specific in another policy, and I have dealt, because it will be in the procurement policy, which is very detailed. But I think what would be a good bullet to add would be just a whole nother bullet that says, and any other action dictated to be completed by the board through policy or state law, because there are a bunch of little nuanced things that the board has to do that we're not going to be able to get in a list. Right. So why don't we put in an overall catching one?
Yeah. Well, that's a good idea. Like, we have to improve, the raw water master plan, right? I mean, that's not in here, but that's an example.
Yep. There's things that are for insurance reasons. There's all kinds of reasons. So I think we can do another catch-all.
Another bullet.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you could, I think of a new board member, some people would read the entire policy and procedure manual, but I suspect some would not. And so I think this issue of the procurement is really, the role of the board in that is really important, and some of these other things. So maybe with your sentence, you could put parentheses, examples include.
Yeah, for sure.
The procurement, contract authority, the ag and urban water master plans, whatever, just giving some breadth and examples to that statement.
Yeah, I think that's easy. We can do that.
George Peters.
Well, I'm not a fan of this, because it seems to me that looking at the org chart, the board of directors are directly below the voters. I mean, the voters are at the very top of our org chart, and then the buck stops with us. We're really responsible for all of it. It seems like this is saying that it seems like it's diluting our oversight ability to ensure. So we make an annual budget, but we can't. Our ability to make sure that contracts or expenditures, we don't have any way to check anything. We're approving it. We have to approve. But then we have no checks and balances. I think that government, our nation's founding was on checks and the different policy of powers, not concentration of powers, it's separation
Well,
of
what if we had
powers.
approval and oversight?
I think approval and oversight, I think we do, I think I'm a lone ranger on this, but I really feel that we have an oversight responsibility to make sure that what we're approving and moving forward is actually being implemented. And if we don't have any opportunity to question it or look at it because it's been taken out of our authority, to me, it seems like it's giving the board's authority away. And I think that you can always have it and not use it, but to give it away, I'm 100% against it.
So that's listed specifically in the first paragraph, 5040.1. Are generally limited to areas of policy and regulation development, identification of strategic direction and priorities, financial oversight, representation of the constituency, and selection and oversight of the general manager. Specific actions may include but are not limited to.
You crossed out approval or rejection of any contract or expenditure.
Because you don't do that now.
But
It's
we
a
have that
misstatement.
authority if we need to.
But
It's a misstatement.
I think part of what she's trying to do is separate out, keeping the policies clearly distinct. So we have the procurement policy that clearly delineates the role of the board and the general manager and individual managers. So that one for me is really taken care of by the other policy. And I think realistically, it's completely, I mean, for me as a board member, I don't want the responsibility of approving or rejecting any contract or expenditure. I mean, holy moly.
I know.
How are they supposed to manage?
Well, that's what we have staff and a manager. for.
Right, exactly.
I mean, but we do have to, and I think it's appropriate, provide oversight
Exactly.
and receive reports and approval of reports, and we get to say, yeah, everybody's doing a great job, or not, or there's improvement needed, right?
Right.
That comes under our oversight function.
Oversight should mean that we could see, if we wanted to see a contract, if we wanted to see what we spent $2.6 million to HDR on, and we want it to be public, we paid $2.6 million for water resource engineering documents, that we should be able to say, we want to see the deliverable of that contract.
I'm asking a question. Wouldn't that be in 5040.1 financial oversight?
I think some of the challenges is that the board acts as a whole. The board does not act as individuals, so there has been a tendency in the past for individual board members to make direction to staff. It really is more appropriate for the entire board, and so the particular item you just referenced related to the HDR studies, it was discussed with the board, and due to the draft nature of many of the studies that are being referenced, we collectively, the board decided to not release them. So I think we're kind of conflating a couple of issues here with individual board members' desires versus the board direction as a whole. We can add more to this, I'm happy to. We always just want to make sure, you don't want policies that are going to be automatically, because they're not consistent with actual practice, automatically wrong, right? We don't want to be in violation of policy or put something in there that by practice we don't do.
Well, I think that's a really good distinction, though, because in the example that you gave about HDR, we did have a board discussion on that, and as a board, we did not support that. So I do think that.
I'd like that to go to a voice vote then.
But it did.
It did.
No, it did not.
It did.
We had a consensus during the director's report, and then it went into closed session, it was discussed in closed session.
And the board can give me direction in a closed session meeting.
But not on items that conflicts with what we just recommended.
It wasn't an actual agendized item.
So I'd like a voice vote on that.
So we're way off topic here. So going back to this policy, are there any other modifications we would like?
I think oversight should be added back in at every level.
It's at the top.
Well, it's at the top, is the way. So it's like, yes, we provide oversight and direction on these the way I read this, these 10 bullets are.
We got oversight.
What if we just write,
Oversight of the general manager.
what if we just write,
Financial oversight in the top paragraph.
yeah, it says it in the top paragraph. What if we write approval of the annual budget and staffing levels and implementation? Why don't we just add implementation to the approval?
Approval of implementation.
I said and.
And implementation. Annual budget operating tempo. Implementation and staffing levels, is that what you're sort of saying?
Well, I think oversight in that context makes sense, because in fact, we do provide oversight of the annual budget.
Yeah.
And we do have up above financial oversight, so, but I think there in the bullet, it's fine. I don't,
Yep.
I don't see, that, I guess, approval, and we're adding high-level oversight on the district's mission, vision, and strategic priorities.
What does that mean? What does high-level oversight mean?
We're not managing the implementation of the strategic priorities. We're ensuring that they are achieved. That's what it means to me. Through updates with the general manager, where she is going to tell us, okay, our goals related to this priority are 1 through 10. We've achieved 1 through 3. We're working on 4 through 6 in the next 7 months, and then we'll be working on 8, 9, 10 in the next, and we'll have it achieved within 18 months. That's what I consider high-level oversight. Not telling her how to do what she's doing, but assuring that it gets done.
Right.
Yes. So that priorities, I mean, famous for organizations, we're gonna do this and that and the other thing, and it doesn't happen. So this is our way of having,
Have oversight.
Yep.
We're not here to get in our way.
yeah.
Provide direction and move out.
See, could see the insertion of oversight into the finance one, but the other ones, to me, don't, adoption and rejection and oversight of regulations and policies, that doesn't make sense to me.
Because we made the policy.
Right.
Well, we need to ensure they get implemented how we make it.
I don't think we can do that.
Yeah. How we make them?
I think this sounds like micromanaging to me.
I have another
That's
question.
what it sounds like to me. Go ahead.
I appreciate it. Doesn't the board hire legal counsel? Doesn't the board hire legal?
Currently, it's by contract.
Well, that's by board decision, I believe.
Yeah, I did not make this, yeah.
The board has authority for general manager.
The board could provide direction to
There's
obtain
a-
new legal counsel.
There's a component in
Yeah.
your contract as well. So,
Mhm.
yes, I think
To an
it
extent.
depends on your procurement policy and delegation to the general manager, but yes, consultants, including legal, as general manager, are a board action.
A new contract or having a new legal counsel, but we also utilize a lot of outside legal counsel that doesn't necessarily.
For council,
Right.
labor council.
Right.
And it's 401 under budget, correct?
It is, yeah, so typically those are addressed through the budget.
It's starting to read really nice, so.
So I did receive some direction, so let me massage this a little bit to see if I can't get it a little bit closer, to acknowledge some of the oversight roles, and then we'll bring it back.
Okay.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, next is general manager's report.
We just have a couple of very quick items. I did have the opportunity to meet with the new city manager from the city of Grass Valley, and he is just wonderful, so I definitely recommend that you have the opportunity to do that. I thought that would be great. We have also been working with the U.S. Forest Service on resolving some of those issues related to the operation of the Upper Division campgrounds, and I think it's going really well. I had a chance to personally meet with the forest supervisor, I think Monday of this week. It seems like a long week already, and it was a great conversation. And then we have something fun coming up, April 16th, the big NID Easter egg hunt. So that is at
Orchard Springs?
Yes, Orchard Springs. I'm like, I'm.
For adults or kids?
Hey, it depends on how fast you run. Yeah,
Just put your bunny suit on.
yeah. It's free game once you get to start going for eggs.
You on the other basket.
Yeah, and then we'll just do a real quick update on our water storage, how we're looking. And the 10-day is looking pretty good right now, so
Yes.
keep your fingers crossed.
Can I ask you a question about the U.S. Forest Service? At the last meeting, it was supposed to be resolved by April 8th because of the season or something like that. So are we still, is it still in limbo or what?
Yeah, so we're making progress. It's unclear to me. They're responsible for writing the collection agreement, so actually haven't completed or not. I think that they just wanted some more verbal assurance, so I think we're on track.
Just to opening up this year?
Yeah, we don't open them up, they do, but it's my understanding that they will be opening them.
And they will be operating, or they're a subcontractor.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a mix with some of these functions for some of the subcontracts. We will have to contract with them. For example, vault toilet pumping, we will probably directly pay the vendor. Yeah.
We're so good at that, huh?
Yes, so, it just depends on the actual item.
Good morning, Chip. All right. Howdy. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and, if it's okay by the board, fold in the conversation about the water in the Bear River that Director Peters brought up. So as we go along, I'll bring that up and try to answer that question.
And then the drought too.
Yeah.
Is there a drought declaration?
There is. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, but we'll start off as we always do with our Bowman Lake precipitation reporting station. And look at that flat line towards the end of the year. It's pretty bad. As Jennifer mentioned, we are expecting another 3 inches here in the next week, which we'll keep our fingers crossed. We did get about 1 inch in that last storm the other day, so that does not reflect it in here yet. So that's good, but probably a little too late for the rest of the state, honestly. As of right now, we're roughly 76% of average. Our April 1st snow survey returned a snow water equivalent of 18.4 inches, which is 55% of average, which is not great. And this time last year, we were at 22 or 24 inches. The difference, though, last year is that when the runoff came, it all soaked in the ground because the ground underneath the snow was dry. This year, the moisture content in the soil is much wetter, and we are seeing some runoff as we speak. So this particular slide shows you that red line just really makes a skyward trend there in the last 2-3 weeks, and that's specifically related to snow runoff, because obviously we haven't had any storms. So it's looking good, it's looking robust. It is early though. So what you're gonna see in this slide is we are peaking out early. We generally peak out in June. We think it's probably gonna peak this year, later April, maybe into May, just depends on what Mother Nature does from here on out. The next round of storms that's gonna start a little cold and finish warm, so anybody's guess at this point in time.
I have a quick question. What year did the 8-year average start?
2013, and that started because of the FERC relicensing and coordinated operating agreement negotiations with PG&E changed the volume of water we can store in Rawlins. So the information prior to 2013 is no longer relevant to current storage amounts.
That's 9 years now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. We'll adjust that. Let's see. Back to the Bear River. So it was asked how much flows went down the Bear River beyond NID. Our records since October 15th, which is the end of last year's irrigation season, since then to current, we have passed 141,582 acre feet below Combi Reservoir. Essentially put it down the Bear River on its way to South Sutter Water District. Now, why did we do that? Well, let's start right here. You can see the yellow line right here. This was October of last year. October 25th of last year, we got a huge storm, 10 inches of rain. It was massive. At that point in time, our water rights do not allow us to capture water in Combi or Rawlins. So we had to pass it. So that was the first shot of water that went down the Bear River. NID passed it. That was about 13,000 acre feet. Since then, there are other players in the watershed, PG&E, who have been managing their own systems and passing water to manage their own reservoirs, specifically Fort Island Spalding. Those are Yuba River system reservoirs. However, when PG&E is managing them, a lot of times they generate power at those facilities and it ends up in the Bear River. That's how they move the water across. This particular year, they moved quite a bit of water into the Bear River system because they had an excess amount, and they have work that they plan on doing on Ford Ice this summer, so they have kept it a little lower than average. So that has meant they have dumped a lot of water. We captured what we could. We basically filled up Rollins and Combi very, very early. The rest of it, we have made power with and sent it on its way because that's all we could do with it. The beneficiary of all of that was South Sutter Water District. They filled 90,000 acre-foot reservoir by December. So there was just a lot of water in the system this particular year on the Bear River side.
So PG&E released water from their upper watershed.
Yes.
But don't they take the first 350 CFS? So they took their entire 350 CFS already and had to pass the rest. Don't they pick that up at Rollins and Bear Canal?
So they manage on a week-to-week basis. This is why we have the coordinated operating agreement. So the first 3,500 acre feet that you mentioned is on the BS system, and we're kind of not really talking about that because that's NID's water. We've kept as much of that up on the hill as we could. We did not want to draw down Bowman or Jackson Meadows if we didn't have to because they're really lagging. They're only about 50,000 acre feet. They're not going to fill. PG&E, on the other hand, is basically abandoning water on the Bear River side of things because they have an excess in their reservoir. They need to manage it. They don't want Spalding to spill. And so in order to do that, they just generate power with it and then send it on its way. Keep in mind, we have very different operations. We operate and maximize for consumptive uses in the summer months. PG&E operates and maximizes for maximum power generation. So we do everything in our power to save it for the summer. PG&E does everything in their power to maximize power generation. Those don't always commingle. We have a weekly meeting to discuss for our coordinated operating agreement what we need. Our needs are for consumptive uses trumps power needs. So you mentioned that earlier. I just wanted to make that clear that we operate the system and the number one priority is for our own consumptive uses, and PG&E abides by that. Now, on times when their own water rights are available and they have to dump, they dump, and we do the best we can with what's available.
We haven't spilled from any of our upper division reservoirs.
So Bowman, we did not spill. Jackson Meadows, we did not spill. In fact, Kean and his team got authorization to close the gates early at Jackson Meadows. That will allow us to capture any runoff that comes into these storms instead of spilling it, which is awesome. We really needed that. It's good news. The lower reservoirs all full. They filled up and spilled, partly because of the rain events were below low elevation and filled in a hurry.
Did Rollins
Nature of the beast.
Oh, yeah.
Rollins did spill, absolutely.
Okay, but there was some confusion about whether it did or didn't.
Yeah, it did spill, but I will say, it did not spill 141,000 acre feet. As I mentioned earlier, because we coordinate with PG&E, when we know that water's coming, we'll turn on all the powerhouses, and in lieu of letting those things spill, we generate power instead and send it down the system. Maximize the benefit.
What I observed that Rollins was not spilling. There was a heck of a lot of water going down the river.
Yes.
And I just called and I said, hey, are you making power? And Chip said, yes.
Yeah. That's our goal. We got to maximize the benefit of the water. Hopefully that helps explain that a little bit more.
And we also opened up, I got a lot of calls these last couple of weeks that all the canals and flats are right.
Yes, so related to that, because there is excess of water available in the Bear River and our reservoirs are already full, we took a little bit of those extra flows and diverted them into the canal systems in Placer County because last year it was very dry and we found that we could not catch up. In other words, we put the water in the canals for irrigation season, it would just soak in, we were chasing our tails. This year there was excess water available, we had the water rights to direct divert, so we went ahead, diverted, and wetted up the canals out there in preparation of the 15th so that we're a little ahead of the game this time around and the water would just soak right in. So some of those canals where water was available and wouldn't affect our storage, we went ahead and used it.
And did it go with everyone's boards to?
We're still in process, and the answer is no. We are still working through that. We have had a ton of changes in requested volumes, lots of cuts, lots of adds, and I'll come back to the board at some point in time and let you know what the totals are, but we're still trying to catch up to those things. Right now, we're trying to get the water in, and then we'll go back and make sure everybody's aligned. Well, we're locking where we can, and other areas, that's not always possible just yet. So we're working on it. Water season hasn't quite started.
I know.
But that's a really helpful context, Chip, because I have seen, and I commented to Jennifer that I've seen the Placer County canals looking really full. And I also recognize that last year I got complaints that I'm not getting my water. And so, and people were desperate for it, and like they will be, maybe not quite as much this year. But anyway, that context is very helpful.
Yeah, good. Really just trying to be ahead of the game and knowing it wouldn't injure our storage.
Yeah.
And we have the
Why
water
not?
rights, let's use it.
Yeah.
Okay, so current forecasts, this should look familiar to you all. We did a similar forecast last year. Best case scenario is the purple line, and that is forecasting 100% of precipitation yet to come and 60% of snowpack. Well, we already know that's not gonna happen. We're already behind on that one. So the purple line's kind of off the charts, but it is a best case scenario. The yellow line is 50% of forecast yet to come, historical forecast of precip, and then 55% of snowpack runoff. I think that one's actually pretty close. And then the worst case scenario is a 0% of historical precip yet to come, and then 55% of the available snowpack runoff. That worst case scenario puts that 300,000 acre feet. We're really estimating we're gonna be somewhere between this 114,600 and 103,300. Still a little bit up in the air, especially with the forecast coming. Keep in mind, please, this does not include PG&E purchases. So you can add another 10 to 15,000 acre feet onto this total.
Does it include the governor's 20%?
Not yet, no. No, this is just straight up, if we ran the system as we historically have, this is where we anticipate we'll end up at the end of the year. So given all that, without any additional regulations or mandates by the state, we would probably request about a stage 1 10% voluntary reduction. Now, that's NID's situation. The rest of the state is much, much worse. And you'll see that here. Here's the drought monitor as we roll through the last few months, all the way up here to March 15th. And in talking with Dan Macon yesterday, he says this is going to be upgraded within the week. And really, the rest of the state's going to move into extreme to exceptional drought as we move into the summer months. We just know it. And how do we know? Well, I'm going to skip over this because I always laugh at this one, and I apologize, but I'm going to laugh at it again. Here's the 8 to 14 day precip outlook, and we're below normal. But the forecast doesn't really look like that in reality. We're going to get quite a bit of rain. The 3 to 4 week precip says, again, below normal. The rest of the state, back to it real quick. Lake Shasta, this is really, really lagging behind, and this shows you why the rest of the state is going to be hurting this year. The darker blue line is where we currently sit. The lighter blue line was what we did in the 2014-2015 drought, and we all remember how drastic that drought was, but then you look at that in comparison to where we are this year, we're much worse. We're not quite as bad as 76, 77, but still not good shape there. Oroville's doing a little bit better, but still not great, and a lot of that's going to depend on how much of that snowpack really runs into these two reservoirs. Again, the bright light of the state, I think, is basically our area, and it's going to be the Folsom Reservoir, still doing pretty doggone good. Bullard's Bar, same thing, doing really well. Our treated water usage is a little bit off the charts. It's because it's been so dry. I think people went ahead and started turning on their sprinklers early. It's been hot, it's been dry, people worried about losing their landscape. I get it, but we need to start picking up our messaging, and we'll be doing that shortly. With that, we have had concerns about our messaging and that we weren't doing a lot. So I put together a slide. We'll be updating you monthly on what we're actually doing. We are out there. We are pounding the streets and sending out the mail. We did 235 treated water notifications of continuous flow. That's basically when your meter shows that water's running 24 hours a day. We notify all those customers. So we sent out 235 of those last month. We mailed 134 high consumption letters. That's basically your water may shut off during that 24-hour period, but your overall usage is much higher than we've historically seen from you. So we mailed notifications to those as well. We did 32 house visits on those folks that were doing high consumption. And in addition, we will be going to the Home and Garden Show. Our conservation team will be working that both Saturday and Sunday. And we're preparing for the Mulch Magic giveaway on March 14th at the fairgrounds. Wait, March, excuse me, May, that's a typo. It's one of those M months. And the Boy Scouts have graciously volunteered to help us load vehicles out there again. I want to thank them for that. That's pretty cool. And then we've also got on board with RWA, the Regional Water Authority, to consolidate our messaging and do further public outreach. So that's for the last month, and we're going to expand on that as we move forward. So just an FYI.
Chair?
Yes.
This is all with relation, mostly the outreach and conservation with treated water, is that correct?
For now, yes, but we are planning on working some irrigation shops with Dan Macon. We've done that historically. We actually had a discussion with him yesterday. And we're going to plan multiple irrigation seminars this summer with a focus on conservation. And,
Because are you going to try and target the large landscape, rural residential landscape?
at this point in time, it's more a discussion of how to water efficiently, not only for those large landscapes, but also ag operations. Everybody joins in.
We're talking about having two separate ones.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, two separate. So
Yeah, for landscaping and ag.
that's the bulk of our water.
Yes.
Did Dan happen to mention how he's doing with his survey?
He's getting ready to send it out. Hasn't been sent out yet. Yeah, so they're still moving along. When do you think it was going to?
Within 30 days.
Yeah, within 30 days.
Oh,
good.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes. Okay, in summary, though precipitation continues to lag, although our storage is at 100% of average, it's early to be at 100% of average. So we anticipate the snow runoff will subside. In some ways, that's not terrible because the state has told us that curtailments and conservation measures will be coming early this year, so prepare for them. So if the entire snowpack has run off by, early May and curtailments come in June, well, it won't hurt us all that bad because the runoff's already happened. So something to keep in mind. Trying to put a positive spin on it, but stretch. NID will purchase all available PG&E summer water. The irrigation season does begin Friday. However, I will caution you, you may get calls from your constituents that the canals are fluctuating. And I will say that is because of the forecast. We're expected 3 inches of rain. I can't put a full summer head in these canals and then take 3 inches of rain on top of that or we'll flood. So they're going to bobble a little bit. I expect as soon as the forecast calms down, they will get back to their normal steady flow and we will see a successful start to the season. The other thing I need to add is that we're going to use whatever runoff is available to us as well and save as much as we can in storage as long as we can. As we mentioned, much of the state is behind. The governor set out an executive order on March 28th. Basically, it didn't have a lot of details in it. It did have a lot of instructions for other agencies like DWR to put forth regulations, DWR and State Water Resources Control Board. Within that, it said that they're going to mandate that all water agencies implement stage 2 of their drought plans, which for us means probably a 20% mandatory reduction.
Can I comment on this, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
So I'm actually, we haven't seen the draft regulation yet. This is something that is still under development by the Water Board, but I'm envisioning something very similar to 2014, 2015, which was regulation focused exclusively on treated water customers and conservation from treated water customers. And back then it was 36%, and that equated to something like 3,000. It was, so NID is fairly unique in the state. There aren't many other agencies like NID where you have a dual treated water and raw water system. And let's just use the number 3,000 acre feet. That's the block of water that a 20% conservation on treated water folks, that's the block of water that would be saved. You could literally cut your irrigation season off one day early and save that, or if not more, right? So it didn't make sense, and we tried to advocate to the state that, look, we've got a unique system here. We'll save the water, but allow us to do it in a way that makes sense for our unique system and both customer bases and so on. I anticipate a very similar discussion with the State Water Board again this go-round. And hopefully we'll be successful for, some flexibility in how we create the savings. But if not, this will be something obviously we're taking back to you. And it presented some challenging communications back in the 14 and 15 period where you're really hammering on the treated water folks and then doing nothing on the raw water folks. So I just wanted to flag that as an item that will likely come back to you.
And we did have a meeting with the ag community yesterday to open up this discussion, kind of give them a heads up of what's coming so they can prepare their plantings for the season and let them know that there's a very good chance we'll be asking conservation from them as well. That mirrors what the state is at.
Yeah, and they were more receptive this time, I think, from a practical perspective, although that we're doing okay water-wise, it's not going to look good into the rest of the state. We're like, no cuts up here. You get 5% of your allocation, we're fine. And so they seem to understand the importance of contributing and participating this year.
I think the ag community they have great points, talking points. They don't want surprises.
Yeah, they've been great.
Yeah, they'll cooperate however, we have to kind of. And that 20%, if we go to 20% on raw water, would that be reorificing?
Highly doubtful. So we don't have the supplies we need to do that. We won't get them in time. Additionally, if you reorifice, we could have a long discussion about this one, but if you reorifice all of them, the likelihood of actually achieving 20% because you reduced your orifice 20% is very, very low. Because what we have found is that people don't necessarily use their water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you shrink the orifice down, you just use it longer during the day, but you use the same amount of water.
And we gave up 1 miner's inch voluntarily last year. Maybe need it back, but we run 24/7 because we have to fill our irrigation pond.
Right.
Will there be a surcharge like there was last year?
No, we're not planning a surcharge this year. As you notice, we did mention that we are purchasing PG&E water this year. We did last year, and that was part of the reason for the surcharge. However, we folded that into our operating budget this year, so we won't have to pass that surcharge along. So that's probably good news for the customer.
Phase 2 mandates surcharge.
It does, and that's why we'll be coming back to this board with probably a modified version of the Stage 2 to comply with state ordinances, but customize it for the current needs of the district.
Communication, that's all it's going to be. Let people know.
And that's why we met with them yesterday. It's much earlier than last year. Last year, we didn't meet with them until the end of June.
Much later.
Is this the same ag group that was convened for the ag ad hoc committee?
Somewhat.
A little bit less, a little different.
Were you participating?
No, I went.
No, it's just a meeting that we reach out as staff to a variety of groups all the time just to receive input and establish our relationships.
I believe you attended the one last year. It's that same group.
That's okay, so that ag stuff too.
Yeah.
So, and then the executive order on number 7 and 8 with water tenders.
Yeah. So basically, that one's a bit of a challenge. Basically states that we can no longer limit water trucks, water tenders from going outside our district boundaries. That's always been a heartburn issue for us. The caveat, though, is that it says it has to be for public health and safety. Right. So it fails well. And so I think we're gonna work on maybe some tally sheets that have addresses and whatnot, so we can try to track that a little bit better, but we got some homework to do. We'll work on that.
So the county is looking for input on their enforcement agency. And I think it's by the first part of May or maybe earlier, that so they could actually help us do the inspections because the state allows for inspections.
What part of it in the county are you talking about?
This would be code compliance.
Code compliance, okay.
Yeah. So but the state is requiring inspections that allows people, if you're getting water tender water, the inspectors are allowed to go under the property. If they're refused, they get a warrant. and then go on.
The state can and will increase inspections across the board. It's not specific to water tenders, it's everybody, including NID. They're gonna come up and inspect our diversion locations, ensure we're abiding by the curtailment. They're gonna check maybe water tenders, all of those things are all on the table. That's what
Because
that particular.
I read it specific to water tenders and human consumption, cooking, construction.
No,
No, I have it before me. It's not so limited. It's, as Chip said, it's enforcement of all water board measures.
The executive order?
Yes. Yeah, I have
it
it in front of me. Paragraph 8 is, so in other words, the expanded inspection authority, is not limited to just paragraph 7, the, hauling water.
Gotcha. But it includes it.
But it includes it, yes.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
If I could comment, I think it'd be very fascinating for the board to, going back to the comments you made about if we switch the boards, we'd save some water. Comments, we don't necessarily do that. I asked Chip for a chart of what is purchased and what is delivered. It shows last year that we had the same purchase amount, but we had a much greater delivery amount of water, which proves that people are not using what they buy.
Right, so in wet years, the amount purchased doesn't generally change.
Right.
The water we put into the system is generally low. In dry years like last year, the amount really didn't change of purchase again, but the amount we had to put in the system went off the chart.
So it's fascinating to look at that discussion about purchase versus use.
So how do you want to follow up on people who are, let's say this, they're buying water, using water, but it's not for a beneficial use?
that's just done on a case-by-case basis, and we just need a phone call to check the usage.
Yep. And then additionally, if we find violators of the policy, we'll go, not only to our own policies, we'll go into the new executive order, finding policies that I'm sure are gonna be in the regulation that's forthcoming. So we'll have many avenues to,
But a heads up would be the first step. That, hey,
Anybody can submit a complaint regarding water waste at any time.
okay.
okay?
Thank you, Chip.
I kind of blew through that because I knew orange was on the table, but hopefully that was good enough.
We're always interested in what you have to say, Chip.
This was important.
Thank you.
It is important. You have really important. Is that all for you, Jennifer?
That is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Board of Directors items, reports? Sure.
I attended the Placer County Farm Bureau meeting last week, and tonight is the South County MAC.
On April 11th, I attended the Western Placer Watersheds Resource Advisory Group meeting. I think I've mentioned this group before. It's a very broad group of federal and state agency representatives, as well as NGOs interested in restoring water quality and riparian health in the Placer County waterways to enhance fisheries and terrestrial species, as well as develop recreational activities that inform neighbors of the importance of natural resource protection. They reported once again that there will be significant state and federal funding available in the near future for nature-based solution projects, and they're going to be reporting back. If I can let you guys know, the next meeting is in July, and they said they would have some lists of who, what, where, what the grants are. There's a lot of money right now in this type of work. And and I know I'm harping, I'm taking up Rich's mantra, but if the board does not want to know what the $2.6 million expenditures were, and that we paid invoices on draft or incomplete work, I'd like a voice vote on it in the public session. We put it on an item, I don't know how you get a voice vote, but I'd like to go on record that we're not interested in knowing what was produced with that $2.6 million. I don't know how to go about that.
I don't know that was the discussion, that we're not interested.
But we don't want to have a listing of what the task orders were, or what the deliverables were developed.
I think the broader context, as I recall, was that in order to, that I think some technology systems are going to give you the ability to spit out exactly what was done with that 2.6 million. What I understand, and please correct me, is that that 2.6 million was spent for a variety of projects and support services provided by HDR, which are quite broad and numerous. And that in order for the staff to resurrect the history of the spending around that 2.6 million will take significant staff time, which would then come on top of other priorities that we have on management's plate. And that we as a board said it's not acceptable to move those priorities off in order to do this. It's not that we don't find that that would be useful information, but that what's coming off the plate? Part of the plan for water gets delayed, the finance work gets delayed, the technology work gets delayed. I mean, it has an impact. So that's what I recall as being the context of the conversation.
So can I qualify that?
We are way off topic again, so. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
About the financial side of it. Any project manager that is, I believe, and maybe we can ask our engineering manager to comment on it. If you have an active project, this is still an active project.
It is not an active project. So the project is not active at all. It's not in the capital program. I really do caution the board. We tend to get really off base. So this, so what the.
How do I request a voice vote?
So it's not a voice vote, so you're wanting it on the agenda, so you actually need two of your colleagues right now to agree with you to put it on the agenda.
Will anyone else agree to listen to this? I'm not talking about the financial side of it or digging into the financial. It's understanding what the task orders were and what the purpose, there's one sentence on the purpose of these task orders that were executed against the HDR.
You know, Laura, my feeling is, so my short answer is I wouldn't support that at this time. And it is because I feel like we have so much bigger moving forward items that we're trying to accomplish that look back is not going to inform necessarily what we're doing. And that to get to what you want, and I don't quarrel with you about wanting to know, but to get there, I think we take so much time away from other things that I'm not willing to sacrifice the going forward that we're doing to do that. So that's.
I feel it would greatly inform the plan for water, and it may save a lot of money moving forward in the plan for water process.
So Mr. Roderick indicated that he did sit down with you and review many of those task orders. I think we're just keeping to revisit a topic that is not providing greater benefit to the larger direction that the board has given. So I would recommend that if we want to continue this conversation, we determine whether there is not majority support on the board to bring this back again. And if there is, then we can bring it back, put on an agenda.
Director Johansson? No. Director Paul?
Can you skip me for now?
Well, you want me to go and then come back to you? Because I'll go no too, so there we go.
And Ricky said no.
Yeah.
Correct. And that is for, you know, as a qualified no, because I think this is not the time to do it. I think that if you want to see that at some point in the future, perhaps when the load becomes lighter, it's a legitimate thing to maybe ask about. But at this time, I wouldn't support that, to have staff do that work.
And I feel it'll greatly inform the plan for water process.
Yeah, that's where I get hung up, is because if there is, if it could provide support for the plan for water, I think it should be brought forth.
So let's qualify what we're talking about.
HDR consulting with
Yeah.
our folks right
So
now?
there were
Okay.
technical studies that were done as part of the Centennial Project. Those were done in support of the environmental documentation process. Director Peters has indicated to me several times she believes that there's a document that we are not disclosing that proves no one needs Centennial.
No,
I have confirmed with staff that does not exist.
I am not saying that.
There were then the technical memorandums that were completed as part of the other effort. Those are on the website and those are there available for use. And so we can use those and leverage those. And so we will be bringing back forth a new scope of work that will leverage the previous work done by HDR that can be utilized and tiered off of for the plan for water process. So the reports we're talking about have never been a secret. They were indicated in the warrants and all kinds of reporting out in check registers. We're talking about a design study for the Dog Bar Bridge crossing.
That's a different consultant.
So I just don't feel that it is relevant right now because the project's not moving forward. Centennial is not a project. It's not a capital project. It's not an active project. To dig all of these old reports up that are in one phase or another of draft form, that I have no context of the report, I have no context of where the report was left at, how much it was draft report, or even where it was going on at the time. And so if I'm going to put all those on the website, I need to be prepared for Director Peters to ask a number of questions about those reports. I just simply don't have the time right now to go through all of these documents for a project that doesn't exist. If the project comes back, yes, you bring all of the reports back. Right now, the project is not a project. It is not an approved capital project.
We never had it as a project, actually.
We are not working on the project. The only work that's been completed on Centennial is related to the management of the properties that were purchased, as well as the ongoing management of the state filed application. And that's it.
I was just gonna clarify, thank you for making that point, because it is a project in the sense of the application of the State Water Board. And, we're telling the State Water Board that, you know, this is a placeholder, we're still interested in this, subject to our plan for water process, which is the number one priority first. But I think you're speaking of a project more in your budget sense.
Yes,
That's all.
I am speaking of a
Budget sense at all.
I'm speaking of in the budget sense. We are not actively working on the Centennial project. The project documents are being referenced are very specific project study documents. We are not working on that project to that extent because per CEQA, we have to go through a more robust alternative analysis. And that was what our response was to the folks that were not happy with the farmer process and alternative analysis that was being conducted for the Centennial project. And so my recommendation is that we wait until we go through the plan for water process. And if there is some outcome, a project level, so we're kind of talking programmatic level up here, if there is some project that those documents can be used for, because that's the level of those studies, then we bring them out when it's relevant. I just don't think it's to our benefit to spend a lot of time, further time on this discussion.
How would we bring them out if they're relevant if we don't?
We've been working in the business a long time. I'm very confident in my abilities regarding projects and project management as well as our staff.
The other thing is HDR, my understanding is that they are a contributing consultant to this greater plan for water hydrology study that we're working on. So I am trusting that if there is information that they uncovered during some prior process, that they would bring that forward to be used in some way. That, I mean, I
would
would
pay them to do it again.
It would be very difficult from a board member position on the dais to have the technical expertise or the deep understanding of modeling or the projects to make a decision about what information we should be using or not. Yeah, so we will always keep that in mind. We will leverage the information that's available. We've had this discussion about 5 times now.
Well, but I think for me, Jennifer, understanding that there was really 2 sets of analyses done, part of which is already on the website, part of which is specific to Centennial. I didn't really understand that before, so maybe it might be my problem, but understanding that differentiation and the fact that a large number of documents are online already and available for public perusal, and that we're really talking about a subset, I'm fine, and I say no.
Okay, so can
I
we,
say yes, so it's 41.
Yeah.
Got my voice vote. Thank you.
So,
Hey, Director Heck.
yeah, I have just a couple things. First is, I am registered to attend the Aqua conference in Sacramento, May 3rd through the 5th, and I just want to encourage other members, I don't know if anybody else has registered or thought about it, but I've really looked at a lot of the agenda items, and I think, you know, that it seems worthy of our time. So I'm going to be there, I can't remember, it's like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm going to be there mostly Thursday and Friday, I think is what's happening. And then I also attended just this week a major meeting with my area's Firewise community, Greenhorn Road Firewise community. These guys are leaders. There's 800 residents that are a part of this, going out Greenhorn Road with one entrance in and one entrance out.
Wow.
And one fire hydrant on all of them. And so anyway, I attended both with my NID hat on and as a homeowner and interested, you know, person. And, gosh.
Two hats at once?
I do, I switch them off. And, there's not a lot to say about it other than it's just so informative about what's happening in our community and how active these folks are getting. And then there was a county representative that came to talk further about prioritizing fire and water, and, you know, there's all these great ideas, and people are, at least my experience is, they're really active in taking this not only seriously, which they all do, but really taking action, you know, with just the everyday homeowners and neighbors. It's pretty inspiring. It was great, and it's another wonderful resource to leverage is these community groups.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's other Firewise communities
Oh, yeah, all around.
rising up in Nevada County. It's great. So Monday went to a town hall meeting on climate change, and Sue Hook was there, Ellie Yano was there, Lars, myself. Talk about what are we seeing, what are the impacts of climate change, how are we mitigating it, what do we foresee? And obviously, well, it's going to be edited, so it's going to be interesting to see how they edit it. It'll be on Nevada County Media.
And how did you feel the whole thing went, and did you have good participation?
Yeah, not a great participation, but those who showed up. Yeah.
Were engaged?
Yeah, exactly, and I thought it went well. You could always do better, but I think part of the message that I took in that night was to reaffirm my commitment and the board's NID's commitment to the plan for water. And so you say it once, I said it 5 times. But, you know, got to get it out there because we are committed to that process. And so last week, Nevada County Farm Bureau met with an ag group. The 23rd of this month, going to Lake of the Pines. Still need an assistant. It'll be for the Earth Day.
Oh, we have one for you.
Thanks. Lake of the Pines, and talk about environment and NID. So talking, one of the things that I'm becoming aware of, and I don't know if I should say it too often, but water in California can be a zero-sum transaction. And when the state dropped from 15% to 5% for basically the settlement contractors, a lot of rice growers, that was not enough water for them to operate their distribution system, so they're not planting rice. But what they did, they sold it to guys like me. So Reuben gets mandarins next year. We're gonna have enough water to keep our approximate 8,000 trees alive. And it wasn't, I mean, the price was not bad. Equivalent to here, I purchased basically 7 miners inches for $33,600. So that's after paying operations and maintenance, DVP construction, and distribution, all in the thousands. So water in the valley is not cheap and it's scarce. It's all supply and demand. These guys could have gotten more money, but thank God that they wanted, you know, Sacramento Valley, Northern California farming to continue. The other option is, we're on the list to drill a new well. We're at 122 feet now. It's always, for generations, 100 years, it's been a great well. And we've reworked it, but we're gonna have to go down about 5 times what it is. We have to go down 600 feet. That will be 160,000. Yeah, maybe.
Is that
They-
your valley operation?
Yeah.
Your NID operation.
NID, we barely, okay, let's get up NID here. We barely made it through with our pond water irrigation. Antonio was just going, we made it. But that pond was getting low.
Yeah.
And now we're replenishing it, and, he's not gonna home run this year on how much product he has planted. It's great to see. And there's more to come.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, my only comment is, to, our general manager, Jennifer, got kudos twice in the paper for a presentation.
3 times.
3 times. For a presentation with planning commission. And, so congratulations on doing a very professional job. Thank you for that. And with that, we will conclude our meeting. Meeting is adjourned.